Chapter 1. You wake up in medieval Japan. The first sound you notice is not a voice, nor the call of a rooster, but the steady rhythm of rain falling into water. At first it is only a distant murmur, soft enough to mingle with sleep, yet persistent enough to pull you gently toward waking. Droplets strike the broad leaves of nearby bamboo before slipping into flooded rice paddies that stretch beyond the walls of your home. Somewhere outside, water trickles through carefully carved irrigation channels, continuing a journey that began high in the mountains before dawn. You open your eyes to darkness broken only by the warm glow of embers resting beneath a layer of white ash. The house around you is quiet. Thick wooden beams disappear into shadow above your head, supporting a roof woven from bundles of thatch gathered during previous harvests. The scent of smoke lingers in every corner, soaked into the timbers after years of fires burning through long winters and damp evenings. It is not unpleasant. It smells of shelter, of familiar routines repeated by countless families across generations. The floor beneath your sleeping mat is cool and smooth, packed earth carefully maintained by many patient hands. Thin woven mats provide just enough comfort to rest tired muscles after days spent bent over fields. Around you, other members of your household still sleep beneath simple blankets stuffed with straw and hemp fibers. In medieval Japan, privacy is a rare luxury. Families share both work and rest beneath the same roof, their lives woven together as tightly as the reeds above their heads. Outside, the rain begins to soften. A faint grey light slowly filters through the paper-covered windows, turning darkness into gentle silhouettes. You hear someone stir nearby. An elderly grandmother quietly rises before everyone else, moving with practiced care so as not to wake the children sleeping beside the hearth. Years have bent her back, yet her hands remain steady as she places another piece of firewood onto the glowing embers. Soon, flames flicker back to life. Their warmth slowly spreads through the farmhouse while thin ribbons of smoke climb upward toward a small opening in the roof. The smoke will never fully leave this home. Instead, it curls around the rafters day after day, helping preserve the wood and keeping insects away. Even the roof above benefits from the fire below. You sit upright, rubbing sleep from your eyes. Your clothes wait folded nearby, simple garments woven from hemp, coarse against the skin but durable enough for endless work. Cotton is still uncommon in many rural communities, while silk belongs largely to temples, wealthy merchants, and the ruling classes. For people like you, practicality matters far more than elegance. You wrap the fabric around your body, fastening it carefully before slipping your feet into straw sandals that have already seen many miles of muddy paths. The morning air is cool. Sliding open the wooden door, you step outside. Mist hangs low across the valley, drifting slowly between scattered farmhouses with their steep thatched roofs. Beyond them lie countless flooded rice paddies reflecting the pale morning sky like broken mirrors. Narrow earthen paths divide each field with remarkable precision, while wooden gates control the movement of precious water from one terrace to another. In every direction, mountains rise gently through the fog. Dense cedar forests blanket their slopes, interrupted only by occasional patches of cultivated land where generations of farmers have patiently carved fields into the landscape. Bamboo groves sway softly whenever a breeze passes through, their hollow stalks knocking together with quiet, musical sounds that have echoed across these valleys for centuries. A temple bell rings somewhere beyond the trees. Its deep voice rolls across the countryside before fading into silence once more. No one rushes toward it. Its purpose is not to command urgency but to mark the beginning of another ordinary day, reminding every listener that time continues to flow as steadily as the rivers descending from the mountains. You breathe deeply. The air carries the scent of wet earth, fresh leaves, wood smoke, and growing rice. It is an aroma impossible to separate into individual parts because together they form the fragrance of rural medieval Japan itself. Life here follows rhythms older than memory. The rising sun, the coming rains, the harvest moon, the first snowfall, these are the true rulers of your calendar. Kings and emperors exist far away, their names spoken only occasionally. Even powerful samurai seldom enter your thoughts unless taxes are due or local disputes require their attention. Your world is much smaller. It stretches from these fields to the nearby forest, from the village shrine to the winding river that provides fish and carries travelers toward distant towns you may never visit. Most people born here will spend nearly their entire lives within a day's walk of this valley. Yet their world is far from empty. Every season brings different work. Every forest holds different sounds. Every stream changes with the rains. Every festival transforms familiar places into celebrations filled with music, prayer, and laughter. A rooster finally calls from another farmhouse. Almost immediately, doors begin sliding open throughout the village. Neighbors greet one another with quiet nods rather than loud conversation. Everyone understands that daylight is precious. Much must be accomplished before evening returns. A young boy balances 2 wooden buckets across his shoulders, walking toward the communal well with careful, measured steps. Nearby, women sweep yesterday's leaves from doorways using handmade brooms bound with twine. An elderly man sharpens the edge of a farming hoe against a smooth river stone while humming softly to himself. Children are already awake. Some chase each other briefly through patches of morning fog before being called back by patient mothers who hand them simple morning tasks. Even the youngest members of the village contribute. Firewood must be gathered. Water must be carried. Chickens must be watched. Nothing is wasted, including time. As the clouds begin to break apart, sunlight spills across the flooded paddies. The reflections become almost blinding. Tiny frogs leap between grasses growing beside the irrigation channels. Dragonflies skim across the water's surface, while white egrets stand perfectly still, waiting for unsuspecting fish. Nature is never separate from daily life here. The forests provide timber, mushrooms, herbs, and wild vegetables. Rivers supply fish and fresh water. Bamboo becomes baskets, fences, tools, pipes, and even toys for children. Every part of the landscape offers something useful, but only if treated with patience and respect. Taking more than the land can spare would threaten everyone. The village survives because each generation learns where to cut trees, when to harvest bamboo, how long to leave fields resting, and which mountain paths become dangerous after heavy rains. These lessons are rarely written down. They are carried instead through memory. Parents teach children. Grandparents correct mistakes. Neighbors share advice during long hours working side by side. Knowledge flows through conversation as naturally as water flows through the rice terraces. You realize that almost everything surrounding you depends upon understanding past carefully from one generation to the next. Without it, these peaceful fields would quickly become wilderness once again. The rain has stopped completely now. Clouds drift slowly away from the mountain peaks, revealing forests stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Somewhere beyond them lie castles, great cities, famous temples, bustling ports, and the courts of powerful lords whose decisions will eventually ripple into villages like yours. But those places can wait. Your own journey begins here, with damp earth beneath your sandals, cool morning air against your face, and the quiet promise of a day's honest labor waiting among the shining rice fields. Tomorrow, those fields themselves will become your classroom, and every careful step into the water will reveal just how much skill it truly takes to keep a village alive. Chapter 2: Your First Day in the Rice Fields. The morning mist has not yet lifted when you leave the farmhouse with the rest of your family. The narrow path beneath your straw sandals is damp from the night's rain, and each step releases the rich scent of wet earth. Ahead, the flooded rice paddies reflect the pale sky so perfectly that they seem less like fields than quiet pools of light scattered across the valley. Thin streams of water flow steadily between them, guided by channels that have been shaped and maintained by generations of careful hands. No one speaks very much. The day is only beginning, and everyone already knows what must be done. The rice plants will not wait. As you approach the nearest paddy, the sounds of the village slowly fade behind you. In their place come the gentle chorus of frogs hidden among the grasses, the distant tapping of a woodpecker somewhere within the cedar forest, and the soft rustling of bamboo bending beneath a passing breeze. Above, a pair of swallows dart effortlessly across the sky, skimming the water in search of insects stirred awake by the warming air. An older farmer steps into the field first. He tests the depth of the water with his bare foot before nodding with quiet satisfaction. Only then does everyone else follow. You remove your sandals and roll your clothing above your knees before stepping carefully into the paddy. The water is colder than you expected. Soft mud immediately gives way beneath your feet, swallowing them almost to your ankles. You instinctively try to pull away, but every movement only sinks you deeper. The farmer beside you smiles, not with amusement, but with understanding. Every child born in the village once struggled exactly the same way. There is no graceful way to move through a flooded field. You learn to lift your feet slowly instead of forcing them free. The mud releases its grip with a gentle sucking sound before accepting your next careful step. By the end of the morning, that rhythm will begin to feel almost natural. The rice seedlings wait nearby, tied together in neat green bundles. Months earlier, they were planted in protected nursery beds where they could grow safely through the cool days of early spring. Now they are strong enough to survive in the larger paddies, but only if they're transplanted with great care. You kneel in the shallow water. An elderly woman beside you separates a few seedlings from the bundle with remarkable speed. Her hands move without hesitation, placing each tiny plant into the mud at exactly the right depth and spacing before reaching for the next. You try to imitate her. Your first attempts are uneven. Some seedlings lean too far. Others disappear almost entirely beneath the mud. A few stand awkwardly apart from the straight rows that stretch across the field like carefully drawn lines. No one scolds you. Instead, another pair of experienced hands quietly adjusts your work before continuing onward. Rice farming is too important for pride. Everyone succeeds together, or everyone suffers together. Hour after hour, the line of workers moves slowly across the flooded paddy. The work is repetitive, yet strangely peaceful. Plant. Step. Plant. Step. The rhythm settles into your breathing. Occasionally someone pauses to stretch an aching back before returning to the endless rows of green. The valley around you grows brighter as the morning sun climbs higher. Mist rises gently from the water's surface, drifting toward the nearby hills where cedar forests cast long shadows over the lower slopes. Beyond them, mountain streams continue feeding the irrigation channels that make all of this possible. Without water, there is no rice. Without rice, there is no village. That simple truth shapes nearly every aspect of life. The irrigation system surrounding you is far older than any living farmer. Small wooden gates direct water from one terrace to another with surprising precision. Earthen embankments must be repaired constantly, especially after heavy rains. Fallen branches, drifting leaves, and loose stones are removed before they can block the channels. Maintaining the water is as important as planting the crop itself. No single family owns the flow of the streams. The entire village depends upon cooperation. Certain days each season are devoted entirely to clearing channels, strengthening banks, and repairing damaged paths. Every household sends workers, because everyone benefits when the water reaches every field fairly. Disagreements do happen. A blocked channel or an unfair diversion of water could threaten an entire harvest. Yet these conflicts are usually settled within the village long before they reach the attention of local officials. Experience has taught people that harmony is far less costly than resentment. As the sun climbs higher, beads of sweat begin forming beneath your simple hemp clothing. Your back aches. Your legs feel heavy from standing in the mud. Small insects drift lazily through the warm air, and now and then a dragonfly lands briefly on a rice seedling before darting away again. You begin to understand why farming is considered honest work rather than easy work. Every bowl of rice represents thousands of careful movements repeated over many months. The meal you will eat tonight begins here, with sore muscles and muddy hands. Near midday, someone calls for a short rest. Workers climb carefully onto the grassy bank separating the fields. Wooden buckets filled with cool spring water are passed from person to person. A simple meal of rice, pickled vegetables, and a little dried fish is shared beneath the shade of a broad persimmon tree. No one eats quickly. Meals are moments of quiet gratitude. Children laugh softly while chasing grasshoppers nearby, though even they know not to wander into the carefully tended fields. The older villagers exchange observations about the weather. One points toward the mountains, where slow-moving clouds gather around the highest peaks. Rain may return tomorrow. That would be welcome. Rice thrives on steady water, but too much rain can wash away embankments or flood young plants before their roots take hold. Every farmer watches the sky as carefully as the fields themselves. There are no written weather forecasts. Instead, generations have learned to read the behavior of birds, the shape of clouds, the scent carried by the wind, and the changing voices of frogs and insects. Nature speaks constantly. Those who survive learn to listen. The afternoon passes much like the morning. Rows of seedlings slowly transform the empty paddy into a living field. Looking behind you, it becomes difficult to imagine the water ever stood bare. Green now stretches across the valley in delicate lines, each tiny plant holding the promise of autumn harvest still many months away. It is a hopeful sight. Yet hope alone cannot guarantee success. Summer storms may flatten the crop. Insects may arrive in great numbers. Disease could spread unnoticed until entire sections wither away. A single season always contains uncertainty. That uncertainty teaches humility. Farmers work with extraordinary care, but they understand that they are never fully in control. The mountains decide how much water will come. The skies decide when rain will fall. The earth decides whether seeds will thrive. Human effort matters greatly, yet it must always work alongside the rhythms of nature rather than against them. As evening approaches, golden sunlight spreads across the flooded terraces. The water glows like polished bronze, reflecting clouds painted with soft shades of amber and rose. The day's work finally comes to an end. You wash the thick mud from your legs in a nearby stream so clear that smooth stones shimmer beneath its surface. The cold water eases your tired muscles. Around you, the other farmers gather their tools, simple wooden hoes, woven baskets, and coils of rope repaired countless times rather than replaced. Nothing useful is discarded. Every object represents hours of labor, and careful maintenance allows even humble tools to serve for many years. The walk home is slower than the journey that morning. Fatigue settles comfortably into every step. Smoke already rises from the thatched rooftops ahead as evening meals begin to simmer over hearth fires. Somewhere in the village, a dog barks briefly before falling silent. Temple bells echo once more across the valley, marking the close of another day shaped by the steady rhythm of work and nature. Tomorrow, your aching muscles will remind you that this was only the beginning. The rice fields have introduced you to the heart of village life, but when you return home, another world of quiet labor awaits inside the walls of the farmhouse itself. Chapter 3: Life Inside a Thatched Farmhouse. The last light of day fades gently behind the mountains as you return to the village. The sky, once bright above the rice fields, now softens into shades of lavender and deep blue. Thin curls of smoke rise from every thatched roof, drifting lazily through the cool evening air before disappearing into the gathering dusk. The day's labor is finished, but life has not yet slowed. In medieval Japan, the hours after sunset are no less important than those beneath the sun. Your straw sandals leave faint prints in the damp earth as you step back toward your home. From outside, the farmhouse appears humble. Its walls are built from timber, woven bamboo, and packed clay, materials gathered almost entirely from the surrounding landscape. The steep roof, laid thick with straw and reeds, is designed not only to shed the heavy rains of summer but also to carry the weight of winter snow. Moss grows here and there along its edges, and small birds often nest beneath the eaves when spring returns. It is not a grand building. Yet every beam has been shaped by hand. Every rope binding the roof has been twisted from plant fibers. Every repair tells the story of another season survived. You slide open the wooden door. Warmth greets you immediately. The hearth at the center of the house burns steadily, its orange light dancing across wooden pillars blackened by generations of smoke. Shadows stretch and shrink as the flames flicker, giving the quiet room a gentle rhythm of its own. Unlike modern homes with separate rooms for every purpose, this single space serves many lives at once. Here, your family cooks, eats, works, tells stories, welcomes visitors, repairs tools, and sleeps. During winter storms, everyone gathers close to the fire. During summer evenings, the open doors allow cool mountain breezes to drift through the house, carrying with them the songs of crickets and distant frogs. Space is shared. So is nearly everything else. Your grandmother is already kneeling beside the hearth. An iron pot hangs above the fire, suspended by a wooden hook that can be raised or lowered depending on how much heat is needed. Steam rises slowly from the simmering meal, carrying the comforting aroma of rice, vegetables, and a little miso. Occasionally, fish caught from the nearby river adds richness to the evening meal, though meat from larger animals remains uncommon for many farming families. The scent fills the house. After a long day in the paddies, it is enough to make everyone's stomach growl. Children return from gathering bundles of firewood stacked neatly beside the wall. The pieces vary in size, each chosen for a different purpose. Thin branches catch fire quickly, while thicker logs burn slowly through the night, preserving the precious embers that will help ignite tomorrow's fire. Nothing is wasted. Even ashes from previous fires have value. Some are scattered across fields to enrich the soil. Others are used in simple cleaning mixtures or preserved for household tasks that require gentle abrasives. A family that wastes little can endure difficult seasons more easily than one that lives carelessly. You sit cross-legged near the hearth. Wooden bowls are passed from hand to hand before everyone begins eating together. There is no great feast waiting after every day's work. Most meals are modest. Steamed rice forms the heart of nearly every supper, accompanied by vegetables grown in small household gardens. Daikon radishes, turnips, leafy greens, mountain herbs, beans, and pickled vegetables provide nourishment throughout the changing seasons. The flavors are simple but deeply familiar, shaped more by the rhythm of the harvest than by luxury. Conversation remains gentle. No one feels the need to fill every silence. Instead, words come naturally between quiet moments, just as the fire crackles softly between each sentence. Your grandfather speaks about the condition of the irrigation channels after last night's rain. Another family member mentions seeing fresh deer tracks near the forest edge. Someone wonders whether the temple festival will arrive before the next planting is finished. Every conversation circles back to the land. The mountains. The weather. The village. Life is measured by these things rather than by distant events. Although an emperor reigns far away, and powerful military leaders govern provinces across Japan, their presence is rarely felt inside this farmhouse. Decisions made in distant cities eventually reach the village through taxes or local officials, but most ordinary people spend their lives focused on the fields immediately outside their doors. Your world is wonderfully small. Not because it lacks importance, but because survival depends upon paying close attention to what lies nearby. After the meal, the house does not become idle. Work simply changes. The older women mend clothing worn thin by countless days in the fields. Needles carved from bone or metal move carefully through hemp fabric, repairing tears before they become too large to save. A patched garment is considered a sign of wisdom rather than embarrassment. Beside them, your grandfather sharpens the edge of a wooden-handled sickle with patient strokes against a whetstone. Every tool must be maintained. A dull blade wastes energy. A broken handle delays precious work during the busiest weeks of the farming season. Children twist rice straw into sturdy rope. Their small fingers work slowly at first, but repetition builds skill. One day, these simple tasks will become second nature, just as planting rice or repairing irrigation channels eventually becomes effortless through practice. Learning begins long before adulthood. There are no classrooms in the modern sense. Instead, knowledge fills the house itself. Every evening offers another lesson. How to weave a basket. How to repair sandals. How to preserve vegetables. How to recognize medicinal herbs. How to predict rain by watching clouds gather around the mountain peaks. Books exist, but they are precious and uncommon in villages like yours. Most farmers cannot read, not because they lack intelligence, but because written knowledge belongs largely to temples, scholars, and members of the warrior and noble classes. For ordinary families, memory is the greatest library. Stories carry history. Songs preserve traditions. Routines protect generations from forgetting what keeps them alive. As darkness deepens outside, a soft breeze enters through the open doorway. Paper lanterns glow warmly against the surrounding shadows, their gentle light revealing woven baskets hanging from ceiling beams, bundles of drying herbs suspended near the smoke, and carefully stored sacks of rice tucked safely away from moisture and hungry mice. The farmhouse feels alive. Not through noise, but through quiet purpose. Even the smoke drifting upward serves its own role, preserving the roof and discouraging insects that might otherwise damage stored grain. You begin to notice how every part of the home has been shaped by experience. The entrance faces away from the strongest winter winds. The roof extends far beyond the walls, keeping rain from soaking the foundation. Tools are stored close to the door so they can be reached before sunrise. Water buckets remain full in case sparks from the hearth threaten the dry straw overhead. Nothing is arranged by accident. Centuries of observation have taught families exactly how to build homes suited to this landscape. Outside, the village settles into silence. Only the steady chorus of frogs rises from the flooded paddies. Farther away, the wind whispers through the bamboo groves, while somewhere high in the mountains an owl calls into the night. The stars slowly emerge above the valley. Without bright lamps or city lights, the sky appears impossibly vast. The familiar patterns of constellations guide travelers, mark the passing seasons, and remind every farmer that tomorrow's sunrise is already drawing closer. One by one, family members prepare for sleep. The tools are put away. The fire is banked beneath fresh ash so that glowing embers survive until morning. Sleeping mats are unrolled across the earthen floor. Within moments, the busy room transforms once again into a shared bedroom. You lie down, listening to the quiet breathing of those around you. The house creaks softly as the night wind brushes against its wooden frame. Rain begins once more, tapping gently on the thick thatched roof overhead. It is a comforting sound, promising water for the fields waiting outside. As your eyes grow heavy, you realize that surviving here depends on far more than working hard. It depends on understanding every corner of this home, every season, every tool, and every tradition passed from one generation to the next. Tomorrow, with the dawn, you will discover that even the simplest bowl of rice on your table is the result of months of careful planning, patient labor, and a delicate balance between people and the land that sustains them. Chapter 4: Food, Farming, and Survival. Morning arrives quietly, carried on a cool breeze that slips through the paper-covered windows and stirs the faint scent of last night's hearth fire. Long before the sun climbs above the eastern ridge, someone is already awake, coaxing the glowing embers beneath their blanket of ash back into bright, dancing flames. The house slowly comes to life once again. Outside, the valley is wrapped in silver mist. Drops of dew cling to blades of grass, and spider webs stretched between bamboo stalks sparkle briefly before disappearing as the light grows stronger. Temple bells echo faintly across the hills, while somewhere beyond the fields a cuckoo calls into the morning air. The sounds are familiar now. Already, you begin to wake before anyone asks you to. Life in the village rewards those who rise with the sun. There is always another task waiting, another tool to mend, another corner of the field that deserves attention. The rhythm of each day is shaped not by clocks but by light, weather, and the changing seasons. Before leaving the farmhouse, everyone gathers for a simple breakfast. Steam rises from wooden bowls filled with freshly cooked rice. Beside it rests a small serving of pickled vegetables, preserved months earlier in large earthen jars buried partly in the cool ground. A little miso soup warms your hands as much as your stomach, carrying the gentle flavor of fermented soybeans and wild greens gathered from nearby hillsides. It is not an extravagant meal. Yet it provides exactly what the day requires. Rice is more than food. It is the heartbeat of the village. Every seedling planted in spring, every irrigation channel repaired after rain, every hour spent beneath the summer sun exists so these bowls can be filled. Harvested rice feeds families through winter, pays taxes to local authorities, serves as offerings at shrines, and even measures wealth itself. A good harvest brings peace. A poor harvest brings worry long before the granaries begin to empty. As you step outside, sunlight finally reaches the terraces climbing the valley. The rice seedlings you planted only days before sway gently beneath a light breeze. Their green leaves seem delicate, but each plant possesses remarkable resilience. Given enough water, careful tending, and favorable weather, they will slowly transform these quiet paddies into fields heavy with golden grain. That transformation demands constant attention. Rice cannot simply be planted and forgotten. The water level in each paddy must be watched almost every day. Too little water allows weeds to flourish. Too much water weakens the young plants. The irrigation gates are opened and closed with quiet precision, directing mountain streams from one terrace to another. Every family understands its responsibilities, and each season the villagers work together to inspect channels for damage caused by storms or wandering animals. This cooperation is not merely practical. It is essential. No household can manage the entire system alone. The fields are connected, just as the lives of the people who farm them are connected. One neglected embankment can flood a neighbor's crop. One blocked channel can leave an entire terrace dry. Success belongs to everyone. Failure does as well. You spend the morning walking beside an experienced farmer who points quietly toward different plants growing along the edges of the paddies. Some are weeds that must be removed before they steal nutrients from the rice. Others are useful herbs gathered for medicine or cooking. The distinction is learned through years of careful observation. To unfamiliar eyes, every green leaf appears much the same. To someone raised here, each plant has its own story, its own season, and its own purpose. The landscape itself has become a living book. No page is written with ink. Instead, lessons grow from the soil. By midday, the warmth of the sun fills the valley. Dragonflies dance above the water, their wings flashing like polished glass. Tiny fish weave through the irrigation channels, feeding on insects and helping keep the water healthy. Frogs hide among reeds, their voices rising and falling in an endless chorus that has accompanied Japanese rice fields for centuries. You begin to notice that the paddies are alive in ways you had never imagined. They are not simply fields. They are small ecosystems where water, plants, insects, birds, and people all depend upon one another. White egrets patrol the shallows, searching patiently for frogs and fish. Swallows dart low across the water, catching mosquitoes before they settle. Even the spiders stretching delicate webs between rice stalks quietly reduce the number of insects that might damage the crop. Nature is not an enemy to conquer. It is a partner whose balance must be respected. When the midday meal arrives, everyone gathers beneath the shade of several broad persimmon trees growing beside the fields. Today's meal is much like yesterday's. Rice. Pickled vegetables. A little grilled river fish. Perhaps a handful of chestnuts gathered during the previous autumn. Simple foods, prepared carefully. There is comfort in their familiarity. You learn that the village does not depend upon rice alone. Small gardens beside every farmhouse produce vegetables throughout much of the year. Soybeans provide nourishment and become miso, tofu, and soy sauce through careful preparation. Millet and barley offer valuable harvests when conditions are less favorable for rice. Along forest edges, families gather mushrooms, mountain yams, edible ferns, walnuts, and berries according to the changing seasons. The forests themselves are generous, but only to those who understand them. Children are taught never to harvest every mushroom from a single patch. Young bamboo shoots are collected sparingly so the grove continues to flourish. Medicinal herbs are gathered only after mature plants have scattered new seeds. The mountains provide because generations have learned not to demand too much from them. This quiet wisdom reaches far beyond farming. Near the river, several villagers inspect woven fish traps placed among the shallows the evening before. The baskets are simple, crafted from split bamboo with narrow openings that allow fish to swim inside but make escape difficult. The catch is modest, a few carp, some trout, perhaps an eel if fortune smiles, but it adds valuable nourishment to meals that might otherwise consist only of grains and vegetables. Nothing is taken carelessly. Even fishing follows the rhythm of the seasons. Spawning grounds are respected. Streams damaged by floods are allowed time to recover. The health of next year's harvest depends upon restraint today. As afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, your attention turns toward the storage buildings standing near the edge of the village. At first glance they appear unremarkable. Raised slightly above the ground on sturdy wooden posts, they protect precious grain from damp earth, rats, and insects. Thick wooden walls shield the harvest from rain, while careful construction allows fresh air to circulate, preventing mold from spreading through the stored rice. Inside rests the true wealth of the community. Not gold. Not silver. Food. Each sack of rice represents countless hours of labor stretching back through the seasons. Planting. Weeding. Repairing channels. Protecting the crop. Harvesting. Drying. Threshing. Storing. Every bowl served around the hearth carries the memory of this long journey. It also carries uncertainty. The villagers never forget how quickly abundance can disappear. A violent typhoon arriving before harvest. An early frost descending from the mountains. Floodwaters sweeping through the valley. A swarm of insects feeding upon tender stalks. Any one of these could reduce months of patient work to bitter disappointment. For that reason, every family prepares whenever fortune is generous. Vegetables are pickled. Fish are dried. Firewood is stacked high. Tools are repaired before they fail. Nothing is delayed until tomorrow if it can wisely be done today. As evening approaches, golden sunlight washes across the valley once more. The rice paddies shimmer beneath the fading light, each terrace reflecting the sky like polished bronze. A gentle breeze passes through the bamboo grove, carrying with it the scent of cedar forests warmed by the afternoon sun. You pause for a moment and look across the fields. They appear peaceful. Almost effortless. But you now understand the truth hidden beneath that calm beauty. Every green shoot depends upon knowledge accumulated across generations. Every meal depends upon cooperation. Every season demands patience. The village survives not because the land is easy, but because its people have learned to listen to it. Tomorrow, your world will expand beyond the fields and the farmhouse. You will come to know the people who share this valley with you, the neighbors whose hands help raise every harvest, whose voices fill the festivals, and whose quiet acts of cooperation make it possible for an entire village to endure, season after season. Chapter 5: Your Neighbors and the Village. The sun has only begun to brighten the eastern sky when the village stirs once more. A pale veil of morning fog lies across the valley, softening the outlines of every farmhouse until the thatched roof seems to float above the earth. Dew gathers on bamboo leaves, and the first rays of sunlight catch tiny droplets suspended from spider webs stretched between wooden fences. Somewhere beyond the cedar trees, a temple bell offers its slow, familiar greeting to the new day. The sound lingers in the cool air before fading into silence. You have now spent enough days here to recognize the rhythm of the mornings. No one waits to be told what to do. Each person already knows where they are needed. One family walks toward the paddies carrying hoes balanced across their shoulders. Another heads into the forest with woven baskets to gather fallen branches for firewood. Two young boys lead a patient ox toward a nearby field where heavier work awaits, while an elderly woman sweeps the narrow path between neighboring houses, clearing away leaves left behind by the night's gentle wind. The village wakes not with urgency, but with quiet purpose. As you step outside your own farmhouse, your nearest neighbor raises a hand in greeting. His smile is small but genuine. Words are few in the early morning, yet familiarity needs little conversation. Here, everyone has known one another for years, often for entire lifetimes. Children grow up together, marry within nearby communities, raise families of their own, and eventually become the elders whose advice guides the next generation. A village is more than a collection of homes. It is a web of relationships. Every household depends upon every other. You begin walking along the narrow earthen path that winds through the settlement. The houses stand close enough for voices to carry from one doorway to another, yet each is surrounded by a small garden where vegetables, herbs, and medicinal plants grow in careful rows. Beans climb wooden poles. Daikon radishes push their white roots deep into the rich soil. Green onions sway gently beneath the morning breeze, while patches of fragrant shiso leaves add both color and flavor to family meals. Small chickens scratch patiently beneath raised platforms where bundles of firewood are stacked neatly to stay dry. A dog lifts its head as you pass before settling once again into the warmth of the morning sun. Nothing about the village feels crowded. Instead, every space has been shaped with intention. Paths follow the natural curves of the land. Drainage ditches carry rainwater safely away from the houses. Fruit trees provide shade during the hot months while offering harvests later in the year. The people who built this place did not force the landscape to obey them. They learned how to live within it. Near the center of the village stands a broad open space. Children often play here when their daily chores are complete, but during busy seasons it serves many other purposes. Grain may be spread across woven mats to dry beneath the sun. Farmers gather to discuss repairs to irrigation channels. Traveling merchants unload their goods here before continuing toward the next settlement. On festival days, the same open ground fills with music, laughter, and dancing beneath rows of glowing paper lanterns. One place serves many lives. An elderly carpenter is already at work beneath a simple wooden shelter nearby. Long curls of fragrant cedar fall quietly around his feet as he shapes a new beam with a polished hand plane. Every movement is slow, deliberate, and confident. You watch for a while. The carpenter notices your curiosity and gestures toward the timber. He explains that the beam will replace one damaged during last winter's heavy snowfall. Nothing in the village lasts forever. Roofs wear thin. Bridges weaken. Water wheels lose their balance. Someone must always be ready to repair what time slowly changes. That responsibility belongs to skilled craftspeople whose knowledge is as valuable as fertile land. The blacksmith, though living in a neighboring settlement, visits regularly to mend broken tools. The cooper shapes wooden buckets that carry water from the river. Basket weavers transform bamboo into containers strong enough to hold grain for years. Potters fire sturdy earthen jars used for storing vegetables through the winter months. Each craft supports every other. A farmer cannot harvest efficiently without good tools. A carpenter depends upon farmers for food. The potter relies upon woodcutters for fuel to fire the kiln. No one truly works alone. As the morning continues, several villagers gather beside one of the irrigation channels. Heavy rain earlier in the week has weakened a section of its earthen bank. Without waiting for formal instructions, people arrive carrying wooden shovels, woven baskets, and bundles of fresh clay. Children fetch stones from the nearby stream. Older men reinforce the bank with carefully placed timbers. Women pack damp soil firmly into the repaired embankment. Within a few hours, the channel flows smoothly once more. No payment changes hands. No one keeps count of the hours given. The work belongs to everyone because the water belongs to everyone. You begin to understand that cooperation is not simply admired here. It is expected. A family unwilling to help its neighbors would soon discover how difficult survival becomes when storms arrive or harvests fail. Generosity is not merely kindness. It is practical wisdom. The seasons are too unpredictable for anyone to face them alone. Later that day, you accompany one of the village elders to visit a household preparing for a new child's naming ceremony. The small farmhouse is filled with quiet excitement. Relatives from nearby villages have already begun arriving along the narrow roads, carrying modest gifts wrapped carefully in cloth. Fresh rice cakes rest on wooden trays. Wildflowers gathered from the hills brighten the entrance. The infant sleeps peacefully while grandparents whisper blessings learned from their own parents many decades before. Life here is deeply communal. Birth is celebrated together. Marriage joins not only two people but often two families and their fields. Even grief is shared. When someone dies, neighbors help prepare the funeral, tend neglected fields, and ensure no household faces sorrow entirely alone. These acts are rarely spoken of as extraordinary. They are simply part of being a village. As afternoon sunlight filters through the leaves of towering cedars, you notice how often people stop to exchange small pieces of news. A bridge farther downstream may need repairs. Wild boars have been seen rooting near the edge of the fields. The shrine festival will likely begin after the next full moon. The weather in the mountains suggests more rain within a few days. Information travels by conversation. Without written notices or distant messengers arriving each hour, every meeting becomes an opportunity to strengthen both friendship and knowledge. The village itself remembers. Its memory lives within its people. Toward evening, smoke once again rises from every rooftop. Children carry bundles of kindling home before darkness settles across the valley. The carpenter stores his tools. Farmers wash the mud from their feet beside the stream. Someone begins playing a bamboo flute softly beneath the shade of an old persimmon tree. Its gentle melody drifts across the fields, blending with the murmur of flowing water and the first evening calls of frogs awakening among the rice paddies. The music is unhurried. No audience gathers. It exists simply because the day is ending. You pause beside the village well and look around. Only a short time ago, these people were strangers. Now their faces have become familiar. You recognize the grandmother who always rises before dawn to light the hearth. The boy who laughs while carrying water buckets far too large for his shoulders. The quiet carpenter whose hands seem able to persuade wood into any shape. The elderly farmer who can predict tomorrow's weather by watching clouds gather around distant mountain peaks. Each person holds a piece of the village's knowledge. Together, they form something far stronger than any individual could become alone. As darkness settles gently over the valley and lanterns begin glowing behind paper windows, you realize that medieval Japan is not built only upon rice fields or temples or distant castles. It is built upon neighbors who know one another's names, who share one another's burdens, and who understand that survival is rarely the work of one pair of hands. Tomorrow, you will discover that even this peaceful village is connected to a wider world of responsibility, where taxes, local officials, and the authority of distant lords quietly shape the lives of ordinary farmers, often without ever setting foot in the fields themselves. Chapter 6: Local Lords, Taxes, and Daily Responsibility. Morning arrives beneath a sky the color of brushed silk. The rain that drifted through the valley during the night has passed, leaving the air fresh and cool. Tiny drops of water cling to every blade of grass, and the rice paddies mirror the clouds so clearly that the earth and sky seem to blend together. A light breeze stirs the bamboo grove beyond the village, its hollow stalks knocking softly against one another like distant wind chimes. You step onto the familiar path leading toward the fields. By now, your feet know where the ground becomes uneven and where smooth stones lie hidden beneath the damp soil. The village no longer feels unfamiliar. The smoke rising from each thatched roof, the quiet greetings exchanged between neighbors, and the steady murmur of flowing irrigation water have become part of the rhythm that begins every day. Yet as you work, you begin to notice that the village is not entirely independent. It appears peaceful and self-contained, but invisible threads connect it to a much larger world. The rice growing around you does not belong entirely to the people who plant it. A portion of every harvest is already promised before the first grain has ripened. An elderly farmer pauses beside the paddy and rests both hands upon the handle of his hoe. Looking across the valley, he quietly explains that these fields are part of an estate governed by a local lord. The family farming the land has worked here for generations, but ownership is understood differently than you might expect. The mountains, forests, rivers, and fields all exist within layers of responsibility. Some lands belong to temples. Others are managed by shrines. Many fall under the authority of military families whose loyalty reaches upward through a chain of retainers until, far beyond the horizon, powerful leaders govern entire provinces. For ordinary farmers, these distant relationships rarely appear in daily conversation. What matters is simpler. When harvest comes, taxes must be paid. There is no escaping this obligation. The tax collector does not demand every grain of rice, but the share required is significant enough that every family thinks about it throughout the growing season. A generous harvest allows both taxes and household stores to be filled. A poor harvest forces difficult choices. Will enough rice remain for winter? Can seed be saved for next spring? Will elderly parents receive the food they need? The questions linger quietly beneath every season's work. You notice that no one speaks of taxes with anger alone. There is frustration, certainly, especially after difficult years, but there is also acceptance. The roads used by traveling merchants must be maintained. Bridges require repair after floods. Local disputes need judgment. Temples and shrines depend upon support. The authority of the Lord reaches the village in many ways, even if the Lord himself is rarely seen. Power, in medieval Japan, often feels distant. Its presence is measured less by soldiers than by obligation. Later that morning, word spreads that a local steward will arrive before midday. There is no panic. No frantic rush. Instead, people simply prepare. Storehouses are inspected. Bundles of records kept by the village headman are arranged neatly. The irrigation channels closest to the main road receive a little extra attention, not out of fear, but from a quiet desire to present the village well. Appearance reflects diligence. Diligence earns respect. Around noon, several riders appear along the road leading into the valley. They are not an army. Only a handful of mounted retainers accompany the steward, their horses moving at an easy pace beneath the shade of cedar trees. Their clothing is finer than that of the farmers, their swords worn openly at their sides, but they pass through the village without unnecessary display. The children pause their games to watch. The adults bow politely before returning to their work. For most villagers, this brief visit is the closest they will come to the world of warriors that later generations often remember so vividly. The steward speaks with the village headman beneath a broad persimmon tree. Their conversation concerns practical matters. How have the recent rains affected the fields? Has any bridge been damaged? Are irrigation channels functioning properly? Has disease appeared among the crops? How much grain is expected at harvest? The discussion is less dramatic than you might imagine. Good governance depends upon information. The steward cannot manage distant lands without understanding the condition of the people who cultivate them. The village headman occupies an unusual position. He is neither wealthy lord nor ordinary farmer alone. Chosen because of experience, trust, and reputation, he serves as the bridge between the community and outside authority. When taxes are assessed, he helps organize their collection. When disputes arise between neighbors, he often seeks peaceful solutions before larger officials become involved. When floods damage fields or roads, he coordinates repairs. Leadership here is built less upon privilege than upon responsibility. It is not an easy role. Every decision must balance fairness with necessity. As afternoon settles across the valley, you accompany several villagers carrying bundles of rice straw toward a communal storage building. The conversation turns naturally toward past harvests. One man remembers the terrible rains that arrived just before cutting season many years ago. Another recalls a summer so dry that cracks appeared in the earth between the paddies. An elderly woman quietly mentions a year when insects destroyed nearly half the crop. Each memory carries the same lesson. Taxes remain, whether fortune smiles or not. That reality encourages careful preparation during prosperous years. Granaries are never filled carelessly. Rice is measured with patience. Seed is protected. Vegetables are preserved. Firewood is stacked high before winter arrives. Planning ahead is not simply wise. It is essential. The village cannot afford to live only for the present season. As the day's work continues, you begin to understand that responsibility extends beyond agriculture. Every able-bodied person contributes according to age and ability. Young children gather kindling and scare birds from newly planted fields. Teenagers carry heavier loads and help repair fences. Adults perform the demanding labor of farming, forestry, construction, and transport. Even the oldest members of the village remain valuable. Their backs may bend with age, but their memories preserve knowledge no written document could fully capture. They remember which mountain paths become dangerous after autumn storms. They know which herbs ease fever and which should never be touched. They recall floods that younger generations have never witnessed. Experience itself becomes a form of wealth. Toward evening, you walk with the headman along the edge of the village. He pauses beside one of the irrigation gates and watches water spill gently into the next terrace. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then he remarks that governing a village resembles caring for water. Too much force breaks the banks. Too little attention leaves the fields dry. Balance matters more than control. The thought stays with you. Perhaps that is why this community endures. Its strength does not come from strict commands shouted across the fields. It comes from thousands of small responsibilities accepted without complaint. Someone repairs a broken fence before livestock wander into the paddies. Someone notices a leaking roof before heavy rain arrives. Someone clears fallen branches from the stream before they block the irrigation channel. No single act seems remarkable. Together, they preserve the village. The sun sinks behind the western mountains, painting the clouds with gentle shades of gold and crimson. Temple bells echo faintly through the cooling air. The mounted steward and his companions have already disappeared beyond the valley, continuing toward another settlement where another harvest will eventually be measured. Their visit was brief. Yet it reminded everyone that the village exists within a wider world of obligations stretching far beyond the horizon. You stand for a moment beside the quiet fields, watching the evening breeze ripple across the young rice plants. The harvest is still months away. Much can happen before then. Storms may come. The rivers may rise. The seasons will test every family once again. But tomorrow, life will carry you beyond the boundaries of the village itself. Along winding roads and gentle rivers, you will discover the lively markets where farmers, craftsmen, monks, merchants, and travelers gather, bringing distant worlds together beneath the watchful eyes of mountains that have stood unchanged for centuries. Chapter 7: Markets, Craftsmen, and Merchants. The valley feels different this morning. Before the first light reaches the tops of the cedar trees, there is already a quiet sense of anticipation moving through the village. Doors slide open a little earlier than usual. Baskets are checked one final time. Bundles wrapped neatly in woven cloth are lifted onto shoulders with practiced care. Today is market day. Not every village has a permanent marketplace, and not every farmer visits one each week. Many rural communities hold markets only on certain days, often timed to coincide with nearby temple gatherings or seasonal trade routes. Yet when the opportunity comes, people prepare with thoughtful attention. The market is more than a place to exchange goods. It is where news travels, friendships are renewed, and the wider world briefly comes within walking distance. You join a small group leaving the village shortly after sunrise. The path winds gently along the edge of the rice terraces before climbing through a grove of tall bamboo. The morning air is cool enough that your breath lingers for a moment before disappearing. Dew sparkles on the leaves, and somewhere overhead, a bush warbler sings from a hidden branch. The baskets carried by your companions are not heavy with riches. One family brings carefully woven straw sandals. Another carries bundles of dried mushrooms gathered from the mountain forests. Someone else has packed jars of pickled vegetables, while an elderly couple balances fresh bamboo baskets across a wooden shoulder pole. These are the products of many quiet evenings spent working beside the hearth after the day's farming was complete. Nothing has been made in haste. Every stitch, every knot, every polished surface reflects patient hands. The journey itself becomes part of the day. The narrow road crosses clear mountain streams by way of simple wooden bridges darkened by years of rain and sunlight. Moss grows between the planks, and water rushes beneath them with a gentle, endless song. Now and then, another group of travelers joins the road. A monk in grey robes walks with measured steps, carrying little more than a staff and a small cloth bag. A merchant leads a sturdy horse loaded with bundles wrapped carefully against the weather. Several woodcutters descend from higher in the mountains, their backs bent beneath neatly tied stacks of cedar and cypress. Each traveler nods politely as they pass. The road is peaceful. It belongs to everyone. By mid-morning, the trees begin to thin. Ahead, you hear voices carried gently by the breeze. The market has already begun. It spreads across an open space beside a Buddhist temple whose tiled roof rises above rows of colorful stalls. Paper banners flutter softly in the wind, while incense drifts from the temple grounds, mingling with the comforting scents of roasted chestnuts, freshly cooked rice cakes, and cedar wood warmed by the sun. There is no shouting. No frantic rush. The market possesses its own calm rhythm. People move slowly between stalls, pausing to admire a finely crafted bowl or inspect the edge of a new farming knife. Conversations begin easily and continue without hurry. Time feels generous here. Your eyes wander from one display to another. A potter has arranged smooth earthen jars in careful rows, each one slightly different from the last. Their surfaces catch the sunlight with soft shades of brown, grey, and ash, colors born from the fire itself rather than painted decoration. Nearby, a blacksmith's small forge glows warmly beneath a simple shelter. With steady strokes of his hammer, he shapes glowing iron into hoes, sickles, chisels, and nails. Each strike echoes across the market, blending with quiet conversation and the distant ringing of the temple bell. Iron is precious. A well-made tool may serve a family for decades if treated with care. People examine every blade thoughtfully before deciding whether to trade for it. Not far away, a woman displays bolts of hemp cloth woven during the long winter evenings. The fabric is plain but remarkably strong. Beside her stand baskets overflowing with dyed thread in gentle shades of indigo, brown, and muted green, each color created from plants gathered in fields and forests. Even simple clothing carries the memory of careful craftsmanship. As you continue walking, the variety of goods reveals just how connected medieval Japan truly is. Salt arrives from distant coastal regions where seawater is carefully evaporated beneath the sun. Fine paper has traveled from villages known for their clear mountain streams and mulberry trees. Tea, still cherished by monks and increasingly appreciated beyond temple walls, appears in small bundles wrapped with great care. A merchant displays lacquered bowls whose glossy black surfaces seem almost to reflect the sky itself. Many of these objects have passed through several hands before reaching this quiet valley. The roads may be narrow, but they carry far more than travelers. They carry ideas, techniques, stories, songs. You overhear two craftsmen discussing a new style of roof construction used in another province. Nearby, farmers compare the timing of this year's rains. A traveling storyteller gathers a small circle of children, recounting tales of clever foxes, wandering monks, and ancient heroes whose adventures unfold beneath mountains much like these. History travels by word of mouth as often as it does through written scrolls. The market serves as one of its greatest meeting places. Around midday, you notice several Buddhist monks accepting small offerings from visitors. Some people pause to ask for prayers for sick relatives. Others simply bow quietly before continuing their day. The temple and the market exist side by side for good reason. One nourishes daily life. The other nourishes the spirit. Together, they create a gathering place that strengthens the surrounding communities. As the afternoon sun climbs higher, you help trade several bundles of woven baskets brought from your village. There is little bargaining filled with raised voices. Instead, exchanges unfold through polite conversation. Trust matters. A dishonest merchant may earn one profitable day, but an honest reputation can sustain a lifetime of trade. Coins do circulate, especially in larger towns, but many exchanges still rely upon goods themselves. A basket may be traded for salt, dried mushrooms for a sharpened blade, rice for cloth. Value is measured not only in currency but in usefulness. Toward the edge of the market, you find an elderly man carving bamboo flutes beneath the shade of a maple tree. His knife moves so smoothly that thin ribbons of pale bamboo curl away almost like falling leaves. He explains that each piece of bamboo possesses its own voice. Some become baskets. Others become water pipes, fishing poles, or fences. A fortunate few become instruments capable of carrying music across quiet valleys at sunset. Nothing from the forest is considered ordinary. Every material has hidden possibilities waiting for skilled hands. As the day begins to draw toward evening, merchants slowly pack away their goods. Empty baskets replace full ones. The temple bell rings once more. Travelers gather their bundles before beginning the long walk home. The roads will soon grow dim beneath the shadows of the mountains, and no one wishes to be caught far from shelter after nightfall. You join the familiar path leading back toward your village. Your basket now carries several modest purchases: a small packet of salt, a repaired farming knife, perhaps a little paper carefully wrapped against the evening dew. They seem like simple things. Yet each represents the labor of strangers living many miles away. The village, though peaceful and remote, is never truly isolated. Invisible threads of trade connect valleys to towns, temples to farms, forests to workshops, and ordinary people to places they may never see. As the first stars appear overhead, the warm lights of your village come into view once again. Smoke rises from the familiar thatched roofs. Children run to greet returning parents. The steady murmur of the irrigation channels welcomes you home. Tomorrow, your journey will continue beyond even the marketplace. You will follow the rivers and mountain roads that bind medieval Japan together, discovering how travelers, ferrymen, pilgrims, and wandering merchants crossed a landscape where every bridge, every forest path, and every flowing stream offered both opportunity and uncertainty. Chapter 8: Roads, Rivers, and Travel. The village is still wrapped in darkness when you awaken. Only the faint orange glow of the hearth gives shape to the familiar wooden beams above your head. Outside, the valley lies silent beneath a blanket of morning mist, and the steady chorus of frogs has only just begun to fade as the first birds greet the approaching dawn. Today, your work will take you beyond the rice fields once again. A neighboring village has requested help repairing a water wheel damaged by heavy rains, and several families have agreed to send both tools and willing hands. It is not an unusual journey. Communities throughout medieval Japan depend upon one another, and roads that may appear quiet are often alive with people carrying goods, news, prayers, and skills from one valley to the next. You finish a simple breakfast of warm rice and miso soup before stepping into the cool morning air. The eastern horizon glows faintly behind the mountains. Mist drifts slowly across the paddies, softening every reflection until the fields seem to disappear into the clouds themselves. Dew clings to the rice leaves, and each step through the grass leaves tiny droplets sparkling in the growing light. The narrow road begins at the edge of the village. It is little more than a packed earth path, worn smooth by countless feet over many generations. There are no stone pavements here, no wide avenues lined with grand buildings. Instead, the road follows the shape of the land itself, bending around hills, tracing the banks of rivers, and weaving through cedar forests whose towering trunks have watched travelers pass for centuries. You quickly learn that walking is the ordinary way to move through medieval Japan. Most farmers will never own a horse. Such animals are valuable and are used primarily by warriors, messengers, officials, or merchants transporting especially heavy goods. For nearly everyone else, the strength of one's own legs is the most dependable form of travel. Distances are measured differently here. A destination is not described by kilometers but by the number of hours it takes to reach before sunset, or by how many rivers must be crossed along the way. The pace is unhurried. No one expects to arrive in haste. As the sun climbs above the mountain ridges, the forest awakens around you. Sunlight filters through tall cedars in long golden columns, illuminating drifting dust and tiny insects dancing in the still air. The scent of damp earth rises beneath your sandals, mixed with the fragrance of pine needles and wild ferns carpeting the forest floor. Somewhere high above, a Japanese squirrel leaps effortlessly between branches. Farther away, you hear the distant tapping of a woodpecker echoing through the trees. The forest is never truly silent. Its sounds simply ask you to listen carefully. The road occasionally widens where travelers have rested for generations. Simple wooden benches, shaded by ancient trees, offer a place to drink cool water from nearby springs. Small stone markers stand beside certain bends in the path, quietly guiding pilgrims and merchants toward temples, shrines, mountain passes, or neighboring villages. Many have weathered decades of rain and snow. Some are softened by thick layers of moss. Even these modest markers remind you that countless people have walked this same route long before your arrival. By mid-morning, the sound of rushing water grows steadily louder. The forest opens to reveal a broad river winding gracefully through the valley. Its clear surface reflects the blue sky, broken only by smooth stones and gentle ripples where fish gather in the shallows. Along the far bank, willow branches dip toward the current, their leaves swaying lazily in the breeze. The bridge crossing the river is built entirely of wood. Its beams are thick, weathered, and polished smooth by years of passing footsteps. You pause for a moment before stepping onto it. Looking down, you watch the current carrying fallen leaves toward distant villages you will never see. The river is far more than a beautiful landscape. It is one of medieval Japan's great highways. Long before roads reached every valley, rivers connected communities separated by mountains and dense forests. Small boats carry rice, timber, pottery, salt, and countless other necessities downstream with far less effort than hauling them over rugged hills. Near the bridge, several fishermen are already tending their nets. One carefully repairs a tier using fine hemp cord while another empties a woven fish trap set among the rocks before sunrise. Their catch is modest. Several trout. A few carp. Enough to feed families and perhaps trade at the next market. Like the farmers, they understand that patience rewards those willing to work with nature rather than against it. Not every river can be crossed by bridge. Later that afternoon, your path reaches a wider stretch of water where the current flows too swiftly for wooden supports. Instead, a ferryman waits beside a sturdy flat-bottomed boat. His face is deeply lined by years spent beneath the sun, and his movements are calm, almost effortless. Without unnecessary words, he helps travelers step aboard one by one. A merchant balances 2 bundles of cloth carefully beside him. A Buddhist monk stands quietly near the bow, his hands folded inside wide sleeves. 2 children clutch their mother's robe while watching the water swirl beneath the boat. The crossing takes only a few minutes. The ferryman pushes against the riverbed with a long wooden pole before allowing the current to carry the boat gently toward the opposite shore. There is no hurry. The river decides the pace. When you reach the far bank, the ferryman bows politely before preparing for the next group of travelers. His work may appear simple, but countless journeys depend upon his quiet reliability. By afternoon, the neighboring village comes into view. Its houses resemble your own, their thatched roofs rising from gardens filled with vegetables and fruit trees. Smoke curls gently from several chimneys, while children laugh beside a narrow stream powering the damaged water wheel. The wheel stands partially tilted, its wooden paddles splintered by floating logs carried downstream during recent storms. Repair begins almost immediately. Carpenters examine the broken axle. Farmers help lift replacement beams into position. Children gather loose pegs and tools scattered along the riverbank. Even travelers passing through stop briefly to lend an extra pair of hands. No formal request is needed. Everyone understands that one functioning water will benefit many villages. When restored, it will once again grind grain, saving countless hours of exhausting manual labor. As you work beside the flowing river, you realize that travel carries more than goods from place to place. It carries knowledge. One carpenter demonstrates a stronger method for joining wooden beams learned from craftsmen in another province. A merchant describes unusually heavy snowfall in distant mountain valleys. A monk shares news of a temple festival that will soon welcome pilgrims from across the region. Every journey becomes an exchange. Not only of objects, but of experience. As evening approaches, the repaired wheel begins turning once more. Water splashes gently against its broad paddles, setting the mechanism into a slow, steady rhythm. The villagers smile with quiet satisfaction. There is no celebration. The work itself is enough. You begin the walk home beneath a sky painted with warm shades of gold and amber. Long shadows stretch across the road as birds settle among the treetops for the night. The familiar mountains stand unchanged against the fading light, watching over roads that have carried generations of farmers, monks, merchants, craftsmen, and pilgrims across the Japanese countryside. By the time your own village appears beyond the rice terraces, the first stars are beginning to shine. Lanterns glow softly behind paper windows, and the comforting scent of wood smoke drifts through the evening air. The roads have shown you that no village stands entirely alone. Every path, every bridge, and every river quietly binds countless communities together. Tomorrow, your journey will turn inward once more, away from roads and marketplaces, and toward the beliefs that shape daily life. In the quiet gardens of Buddhist temples and beneath the ancient trees of Shinto shrines, you will discover a world where the changing seasons, the spirits of nature, and the memory of ancestors are woven gently into every ordinary day. The ancestors are remembered not because they are distant figures from history, but because their lives continue through the fields they cleared, the houses they built, the irrigation channels they dug, and the customs they carefully passed from one generation to the next. Memory itself becomes an act of respect. Outside, darkness settles gently across the valley. Lanterns glow warmly behind paper windows. Fireflies drift above the edges of the paddies, their tiny lights rising and falling like wandering stars. The temple bell rings once more before the night grows still. Its deep voice echoes across forests, rivers, and fields, reminding every listener that another day has quietly become part of the endless turning of the seasons. Tomorrow, the valley will awaken in celebration. The ordinary rhythm of work will give way to music, lanterns, shared meals, and joyful gatherings, as the changing seasons are welcomed through festivals that bind the entire community together in gratitude, remembrance, and hope. Even without understanding every phrase, you feel the rhythm settling gently into your breathing. Silence between the chants seems just as meaningful as the chants themselves. Outside, the temple gardens invite slow walking. Carefully placed stones rest among patches of soft moss. Small maple trees cast delicate shadows across winding paths. A bamboo water fountain fills slowly before tipping forward with a hollow wooden click, sending fresh spring water into a shallow basin below. Its gentle rhythm repeats again and again. No one rushes through the garden. The monks understand that quiet observation is itself a form of practice. You sit beneath the shade of an old pine tree. From this hillside, the entire valley stretches before you. The rice paddies shimmer beneath the afternoon sun. Smoke rises from scattered farmhouses. Children can be seen carrying bundles of kindling along narrow paths that weave between fields. Temple bells, birdsong, flowing water, and distant laughter blend together into a single peaceful soundscape. Looking down upon the village, you begin to understand something important. Religion here is not confined to special occasions. It shapes ordinary moments. Lighting the morning hearth. Planting the first seedlings of spring. Giving thanks after harvest. Remembering grandparents whose wisdom still guides the family. Respecting forests that provide timber and rivers that provide fish. Everyday life itself becomes an expression of gratitude. As evening approaches, villagers gather at a small family altar inside their farmhouse. A few grains of freshly cooked rice are placed before simple wooden tablets bearing the names of ancestors. A candle is lit. Incense curls slowly upward. Children bow beside their parents, learning through quiet example rather than lengthy instruction. Much of his work resembles tending a garden. Keeping the shrine clean is itself an act of devotion. Order reflects respect. As you watch villagers arrive throughout the morning, you notice that their prayers are remarkably practical. One farmer offers thanks for healthy seedlings. A young mother quietly wishes for her child's recovery from fever. An elderly couple prays for a peaceful harvest. These hopes are ordinary. They arise directly from daily life. The sacred and the everyday are not separated here. They flow naturally into one another. Later, your journey continues toward the Buddhist temple whose bell greeted the dawn. Unlike the hidden shrine nestled within the forest, the temple overlooks the valley from a gentle hillside. Stone steps climb steadily toward broad wooden halls whose dark tiled roofs extend gracefully beneath the sky. The scent of incense drifts through the cool air. Its fragrance is warm and earthy, lingering gently among flowering shrubs carefully tended by resident monks. A novice monk welcomes visitors with quiet kindness. He explains that Buddhism arrived in Japan centuries earlier from the Asian mainland, bringing teachings about compassion, suffering, impermanence, and the path toward enlightenment. Over time, these teachings found a comfortable place beside the older traditions of Shinto. Rather than replacing one another, the two ways of understanding the world gradually became intertwined. Many villagers visit both shrines and temples without feeling any contradiction. One honors the spirits connected to nature and ancestors. The other offers guidance for the deeper questions of life, death, and the nature of the human heart. Inside the temple hall, candles flicker before carved wooden statues. Their golden surfaces glow softly in the dim light. Monks kneel quietly upon woven mats, chanting ancient sutras in calm, measured voices. The words rise and fall like slow waves upon a peaceful sea. Mountains possess their own presence. Ancient trees deserve respect. Clear rivers, unusual rocks, waterfalls, and forests may all be places where unseen spirits, known as kami, are believed to dwell. This understanding forms the heart of Shinto, the native spiritual tradition of Japan. The kami are not distant rulers watching from beyond the clouds. They are closely connected to the natural world. Some are associated with particular places. Others with ancestors, harvests, or the changing seasons. Rather than fearing them constantly, people seek to live alongside them with gratitude and respect. The shrine appears almost unexpectedly among the cedar trees. Its wooden gate, known as a torii, stands quietly beneath the forest canopy. Time has softened its color, and patches of moss climb gently along its base. Beyond it, a narrow path leads through towering trees whose branches filter the sunlight into shifting patterns across the ground. The air feels cooler here. Still, you instinctively lower your voice. No one has asked you to. The place itself encourages calm. Near the entrance, clear spring water flows continuously into a smooth stone basin. Visitors rinse their hands and mouths before approaching the shrine, a simple act of purification rather than cleanliness alone. The water is cold enough to awaken every sense. Droplets fall back into the basin with soft, steady sounds that mingle with birds singing high above. The shrine building is modest. Its roof is carefully thatched, its wooden pillars polished by decades of careful maintenance. Fresh evergreen branches decorate the entrance. A few small offerings of rice, fruit, and flowers rest quietly before the sanctuary. Nothing here seeks to impress through grandeur. Its beauty comes from harmony with the forest surrounding it. The priest greets visitors with a gentle bow. His white and green robes move softly as he sweeps fallen cedar needles from the path. Chapter 9: Buddhism, Shinto, and Everyday Beliefs. The morning arrives wrapped in silence. A thin layer of mist rests upon the rice paddies, softening every reflection until the valley seems suspended between earth and sky. The first rays of sunlight touch the highest cedar branches, while the lower forest remains cool and shadowed. Somewhere beyond the bamboo grove, a temple bell sounds a single deep note. It does not demand attention. It simply becomes part of the morning, as natural as birdsong or the murmur of flowing water. You have now spent many weeks living among the people of this village. You understand the rhythm of the fields. You recognize the changing voices of the river after rain. You know which paths remain dry and which become slippery beneath fallen maple leaves. Yet there is another rhythm quietly shaping every day, one that cannot be seen in the soil or heard in the wind alone. It lives in the beliefs of the people around you. Before anyone begins work in the paddies, an elderly woman pauses beside a small wooden shelf fixed near the entrance of her home. Upon it rests a tiny arrangement of evergreen branches, a simple ceramic bowl, and a few grains of freshly cooked rice. She bows gently. Her hands come together for only a moment. No long ceremony follows. No audience gathers. The offering is quiet, almost private. Then she turns and begins her day. You soon notice similar moments everywhere. A farmer pauses briefly before entering the fields. Children bow respectfully when passing the village shrine. Travelers leave small offerings beside weathered stone statues standing quietly along mountain roads. These gestures are woven so naturally into daily life that no one thinks to explain them. They are simply part of living well. The village elder notices your curiosity. As you walk together toward the nearby shrine, he explains that the people here do not think of the world as empty. Chapter 10: Festivals throughout the year. The first hint that today will be different comes before sunrise. The village awakens as it always does, with the gentle crackle of the hearth and the distant murmur of water flowing through the irrigation channels. Mist still blankets the rice paddies, and the mountains remain hidden behind pale grey clouds. Yet beneath the familiar sounds, there is an unmistakable feeling of quiet excitement. The day's work will not disappear. The rice still needs water. The animals still need feeding. The firewood still waits to be stacked. But today, these tasks are completed a little earlier, with lighter steps and brighter faces. A festival is approaching. For people living in medieval Japan, festivals are not interruptions to ordinary life. They are woven into it. They mark the changing seasons, celebrate successful harvests, honor local kami, remember ancestors, and bring scattered communities together. After weeks or months of demanding labor, they offer something equally necessary, a chance to rest, to give thanks, and to remember that survival is strengthened not only by work but also by shared joy. As the morning sun rises above the cedar-covered hills, families begin preparing the village. Children sweep fallen leaves from the central gathering place with handmade brooms. Women hang fresh strips of white paper from ropes stretched between wooden posts, where they flutter softly in the breeze. Young men repair lantern frames that have been carefully stored since the previous celebration, replacing torn paper with fresh sheets that glow warmly once lit. Even the oldest villagers find small ways to help. An elderly grandmother patiently shapes rice flour into soft dumplings while humming a song she first learned as a child. Nearby, another elder carefully polishes a small bronze bell used only during festival ceremonies. Every pair of hands contributes. The preparations themselves become part of the celebration. You walk toward the village shrine, where activity has already begun. Fresh evergreen branches decorate the entrance beneath the weathered torii gate. The stone path has been swept until not a single cedar needle remains. Buckets of clear spring water stand ready for visitors who wish to cleanse their hands before offering prayers. The shrine priest moves quietly among the preparations. He offers gentle guidance but rarely gives commands. Everyone already understands what needs to be done. These traditions have been repeated so many times that they live comfortably within memory. The village remembers them as naturally as it remembers the rhythm of planting and harvest. By midday, people begin arriving from neighboring settlements. Some walk alone along narrow mountain paths. Others travel in family groups carrying wrapped bundles of food balanced across wooden shoulder poles. Children who have not seen one another since the previous festival greet each other with delighted laughter before racing toward the open square. The quiet roads that usually carry farmers and merchants now fill with relatives, friends, monks, craftsmen, and travelers, all moving at the same unhurried pace. The village suddenly feels larger. Not because new buildings have appeared, but because familiar places are filled with familiar faces. The air itself seems different. The scent of fresh cedar mingles with sweet rice cakes cooking over charcoal fires. Steam rises from large wooden pots where vegetables simmer slowly into nourishing soups. Someone begins roasting river fish over glowing coals, while another family prepares chestnuts gathered during the previous autumn. The aromas drift gently through the village, blending with incense carried from the nearby shrine. No meal is extravagant. Yet together they become a feast. Everyone has brought something. Everyone shares. The harvest belongs not only to individual households but to the entire community that helped make it possible. As afternoon settles over the valley, music begins. It starts quietly. One bamboo flute carries a slow melody across the gathering, soon joined by the steady heartbeat of a small hand drum. Wooden clappers mark the rhythm while voices rise together in songs that have echoed through these mountains for generations. The melodies are simple enough that nearly everyone can join. Children sing beside grandparents. Young farmers laugh as they remember verses nearly forgotten during the busiest weeks in the fields. Even visitors from neighboring villages know many of the songs, though each community adds its own familiar variations. Music here belongs to everyone. No audience watches from a distance. The village itself becomes the performance. Near the center of the gathering, several men carefully lift a beautifully decorated portable shrine. Though modest in size compared to those of great cities, it has been lovingly maintained for many years. Bright cords, carved wooden ornaments, and fresh greenery decorate its frame. With slow, measured steps, they carry it through the village. People bow respectfully as it passes. Children scatter flower petals gathered from nearby hillsides along the path ahead. The procession moves without haste. Its purpose is not spectacle but gratitude. It reminds everyone that the blessings of the fields, forests, rivers, and mountains are shared gifts deserving respect. As you walk alongside the procession, you notice how often people stop simply to talk. A farmer from another valley describes unusually early cherry blossoms. A carpenter shares a clever new method for strengthening roof beams against heavy snow. A grandmother exchanges recipes for preserving vegetables through long winters. Children proudly compare the baskets they have learned to weave. News spreads naturally through conversation. Every festival becomes an opportunity to exchange knowledge as well as celebration. Late in the afternoon, games begin in the open square. Young boys test their balance by walking along narrow wooden beams laid across the grass. Girls compete to see who can weave the fastest length of straw rope. Older villagers smile quietly, remembering when they once played the same games beneath these very trees. The prizes are simple. Perhaps a sweet rice cake. Perhaps a carved wooden toy. The greatest reward is the laughter shared together. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western mountains, golden light washes across the valley. The rice paddies shimmer like polished bronze beyond the village. Dragonflies skim the water's surface. The wind carries the scent of ripening grain through the bamboo groves. Lanterns are lit one by one. Their warm glow transforms the familiar streets into something almost dreamlike. Soft light shines through delicate paper walls, illuminating smiling faces gathered around low wooden tables. Shadows dance gently across thatched roofs while the first stars appear overhead. The festival grows quieter as darkness deepens. The excitement of the afternoon gives way to peaceful conversation. Some villagers sit beside the shrine listening to monks chant evening prayers. Others gather beneath the old persimmon tree where a storyteller begins recounting ancient tales. His voice is calm and measured, speaking of clever fox spirits, wandering monks, faithful farmers, and mountain guardians whose kindness rewards those who live with honesty and humility. Children listen with wide eyes. Adults smile softly, having heard these stories many times before. The stories are never exactly the same. Each telling carries something new. Just as every season resembles the last while remaining entirely its own. Eventually, the fires burn lower. Families begin the gentle walk back toward their homes. The laughter fades into quiet conversation. Lanterns sway softly as they disappear one by one along narrow village paths. The festival is ending. Tomorrow, the rice fields will once again require careful attention. The irrigation channels will need inspection. Tools will need repair. Life will return to its familiar rhythm. Yet something has quietly changed. The bonds between neighbors have been renewed. Children have learned traditions that will one day become their responsibility to preserve. Visitors have carried new ideas back to distant valleys. Gratitude has been shared as freely as food. You realize that these festivals are not escapes from ordinary life. They are one of the reasons ordinary life remains bearable through long seasons of labor. As you lie beneath the familiar thatched roof that evening, listening to the distant chorus of frogs beyond the paddies, you understand that every celebration has also honored the land itself. Tomorrow, you will leave the village paths behind and journey into the forests and mountains that surround this valley, the ancient landscapes that provide timber, bamboo, clean water, wild food, and quiet wisdom to everyone who calls medieval Japan home. Chapter 11: Forests, Mountains, and Nature. You awaken before the first birds begin to sing. The farmhouse is still, save for the quiet crackle of the hearth where a few glowing embers have survived the night beneath a blanket of pale ash. Outside, darkness lingers among the cedar trees, and the valley rests beneath a veil of cool mist that softens every familiar shape. Today, your work will lead away from the rice paddies. The mountains are calling. For the people of your village, The forests that rise beyond the fields are not distant wilderness. They are as familiar as the paths between neighboring houses. The mountains provide timber for homes, bamboo for tools, herbs for medicine, mushrooms for the cooking pot, and clear streams that feed every rice terrace below. Without them, the valley could not survive. You shoulder a woven basket and follow several villages toward the forest edge. The narrow trail climbs steadily beneath towering cedars whose trunks disappear high into the dim canopy above. Their bark is dark with morning moisture, and the air beneath their branches is cool enough that your breath remains visible for a moment before fading into the stillness. The forest has its own silence. It is never empty. Instead, countless gentle sounds weave together so naturally that none seeks attention over another. The distant rush of a mountain stream. The rustle of leaves stirred by unseen animals. The steady tapping of a woodpecker somewhere deeper among the trees. The soft whisper of wind passing through bamboo. You begin walking more slowly. Not because the path is difficult, but because the forest encourages patience. The villagers around you seem to know every bend in the trail. One pauses beside a moss-covered stone to point toward fresh hoofprints left by a deer during the night. Another notices claw marks high upon a cedar where a black bear searched for insects weeks before. These signs are observed with interest rather than alarm. Wild animals belong here as surely as people do. Respect, rather than fear, guides every step. As sunlight gradually filters through the branches, the forest floor reveals a rich world often hidden from hurried eyes. Soft carpets of moss cover fallen logs. Tiny ferns unfurl beside ancient tree roots. Clusters of mushrooms emerge from damp earth nourished by countless seasons of fallen leaves. An elderly woman kneels carefully beside one patch. She studies the mushrooms for several moments before harvesting only a few. The youngest remain untouched. Older ones are left behind to scatter their spores. The lesson requires no explanation. Taking everything today would leave little for tomorrow. The forest rewards restraint. Farther uphill, the trail enters a grove of bamboo. The atmosphere changes immediately. Instead of broad cedar trunks, slender green stalks rise toward the sky in graceful clusters. Each gust of wind sends them swaying together, their hollow stems brushing softly against one another with a sound unlike any other in the natural world. It is a gentle music. Steady. Endless. Almost meditative. The villagers stop to harvest several mature stalks. Not the youngest. Not the oldest. Only those ready to be used. Bamboo is among the most valuable plants in the countryside. Strong yet light, it becomes baskets, fences, fishing poles, water pipes, roof supports, cooking utensils, measuring tools, musical instruments, and children's toys. Even split into thin strips, it remains remarkably durable. Very little is wasted. Watching experienced hands cut and prepare the stalks, you begin to appreciate how deeply every household depends upon materials gathered from these hills. The forest is not simply admired. It is carefully understood. By midday, you reach a clearing where a spring emerges quietly from the mountainside. Crystal clear water flows from beneath smooth stones before beginning its long journey toward the valley below. Several villagers pause to fill their wooden buckets. The water is cold enough to numb your fingers. Its taste is fresh and clean, carrying only the faint mineral memory of the rocks through which it has traveled. This spring will eventually become the water flowing through irrigation channels beside the rice fields. The connection is impossible to ignore. Everything begins here. The forests protect the mountains. The mountains gather the rain. The rain feeds the streams. The streams nourish the paddies. The paddies sustain the village. Every part depends upon every other. As you continue climbing, the trees gradually thin. The view opens suddenly across the valley. From this height, the rice terraces appear like mirrors carefully placed among folds of green earth. Tiny thatched farmhouses rest between them, their smoke rising gently into the afternoon sky. Beyond them lie more forests, more rivers, more distant villages hidden among the hills. The landscape seems peaceful beyond measure. Yet you now understand how much careful work is quietly woven into its beauty. None of these terraces appeared by accident. Every stone retaining wall has been placed by human hands. Every irrigation channel has been dug and maintained through generations of labor. Nature provides the foundation. People patiently shape it without forgetting its limits. An elderly woodcutter joins you beneath the shade of a broad maple tree. His axe rests quietly beside him as he studies the valley below. He explains that not every tree may be cut. Certain groves are left untouched because they protect slopes from landslides. Young cedars are allowed decades to mature before harvest. Dead trees often remain standing, providing homes for birds and insects while slowly returning nutrients to the soil. Even firewood is gathered thoughtfully. Fallen branches are collected before healthy trees are felled. The mountains are generous. But generosity depends upon care. The afternoon passes gathering herbs known to ease fevers, stomach pains, and aching joints. The oldest villagers identify each plant effortlessly. Some leaves are dried beside the hearth for winter. Certain roots are carefully cleaned before being stored. Flowers blooming for only a few weeks each year are harvested at precisely the right moment. Knowledge like this cannot be learned from a single season. It belongs to lifetimes spent paying attention. As shadows lengthen beneath the trees, you hear an unfamiliar sound. High above, several monkeys move gracefully through the branches. They pause only briefly to observe the people below before disappearing once more into the forest canopy. No one attempts to chase them. They have always lived here. Sometimes they damage crops near the village. Sometimes they simply pass through. Sharing the landscape requires patience with creatures whose needs are not so different from your own. The journey home begins beneath golden afternoon light. The baskets are now filled with bamboo, mushrooms, medicinal herbs, and carefully selected firewood. Every item has been gathered with intention. Nothing unnecessary has been taken. The descent feels easier than the climb. Sunlight filters through the cedar branches in long glowing beams while birds settle gradually toward their evening roosts. When you finally emerge from the forest, the valley lies before you once again. The rice paddies shimmer beneath the setting sun. Thin columns of smoke rise from familiar rooftops. Children chase dragonflies along narrow earthen paths while elders sit quietly outside their homes, enjoying the cool evening air. You realize that the mountains surrounding the village are far more than a beautiful backdrop. They are silent partners in every harvest. Every bowl of rice, every wooden beam, every woven basket, every warm hearth fire carries a small piece of the forest within it. As darkness settles gently across the valley, the wind once again stirs the bamboo groves beyond the fields. Their quiet music drifts through the evening, reminding you that the people of medieval Japan survive not by conquering nature, but by learning its rhythms with patience, humility, and care. Tomorrow, your gaze will travel beyond these familiar mountains. Through the stories of merchants, monks, and wandering pilgrims, you will begin to imagine the wider world that stretches far beyond your valley, a Japan filled with castles, great temples, busy ports, distant capitals, and countless lives unfolding beyond the horizon, even as your own quiet village continues its steady rhythm beneath the changing seasons. Chapter 12: The World Beyond Your Village. The valley greets another morning with quiet certainty. A pale mist drifts across the flooded rice paddies, turning each terrace into a mirror of soft silver. The bamboo groves whisper gently in the early breeze, while high above, the first rays of sunlight catch the tops of the cedar forests that cloak the surrounding mountains. From somewhere beyond the trees, a temple bell sends its familiar voice across the fields, lingering for a moment before the sounds of waking life slowly replace it. The village feels as it always does. Smoke rises from thatched roofs. Wooden buckets creak as they are lowered into the communal well. Children carry kindling toward the hearth before breakfast. Farmers inspect irrigation channels that have quietly carried mountain water through the night. Everything follows a rhythm that has become deeply familiar. Yet as you stand beside the edge of the nearest rice paddy, watching dragonflies skim across its still surface, you find yourself wondering about the world beyond these mountains. You have heard its echoes many times already. A merchant speaking of distant ports. A monk describing temples built upon hills far from this valley. A traveler recalling roads that continue for weeks without reaching their end. The stories linger in your thoughts. For most people living in medieval Japan, the wider world is known not through personal experience but through the words of those who have walked farther than they ever will. An elderly neighbor notices your thoughtful expression. As you walk together toward the fields, he smiles quietly. When I was young, he says, I believed these mountains marked the edge of the world. He pauses for a moment, looking toward the blue ridges rising in the distance. Now I know they simply hide another valley. His words remain with you. The world beyond your village is vast, yet it is connected by countless unseen paths. Merchants carry goods. Pilgrims carry prayers. Monks carry teachings. Messengers carry news. Every journey links one quiet community to another. Although you may never travel to the great cities yourself, they still shape your life in subtle ways. The iron blade fastened to your farming hoe may have been forged in a busy provincial town. The salt preserving your vegetables likely came from distant coastal shores. The paper used for temple records may have traveled through many hands before reaching this valley. Even ideas move along these roads. A carpenter learns a stronger way to join roof beams. A monk introduces a new style of chanting. A farmer hears about a different method of managing irrigation. Knowledge journeys just as surely as people do. Later that morning, a small group of travelers arrives at the village. Their clothing bears the dust of many roads. One is a merchant leading a sturdy packhorse loaded with carefully wrapped bundles. Another is a young monk returning from months of study at a larger temple. The third is an elderly pilgrim whose straw hat has faded beneath countless seasons of sun and rain. The villagers welcome them with quiet hospitality. Water is offered. Simple food is shared. In return, stories begin to flow. The merchant speaks first. He describes bustling market towns where streets are lined with workshops filled with blacksmiths, potters, weavers, and carpenters. He tells of river ports where boats unload timber from mountain forests and rice from fertile plains. He speaks of warehouses stacked high with goods arriving from provinces separated by many days of travel. To you, it sounds almost impossible. Your village contains only a few dozen homes. The thought of streets crowded with hundreds of people seems difficult to imagine. Yet the merchant smiles knowingly. The cities, he says softly, have their own rhythms. The young monk shares different memories. He speaks not of markets but of temples. Some stand high upon forested mountains where morning clouds drift through ancient wooden gates. Others overlook broad valleys, their great bells heard for many miles. Within their libraries rest carefully copied Buddhist sutras, preserved by generations of patient scribes. Students travel long distances to study beneath respected teachers. Monks debate philosophy beneath maple trees whose leaves turn brilliant crimson each autumn. Though peaceful, these temples are alive with quiet learning. The elderly pilgrim listens patiently before adding his own stories. He has visited famous shrines where thousands gather during festivals. He has crossed mountain passes buried beneath deep winter snow. He has slept beneath the roofs of humble roadside inns where strangers shared warm rice and stories beside glowing hearths. His journeys have been long. Yet he speaks most fondly not of famous places, but of ordinary villages where kind people welcomed weary travelers without expecting anything in return. Hospitality, he says, is remembered longer than beautiful scenery. As afternoon settles across the valley, you begin to understand that medieval Japan is a land of remarkable variety. Beyond your mountains lie fishing villages where daily life follows the tides rather than the planting season. Along broad rivers stand thriving market towns connected by busy waterways. Farther still rise impressive castles, their wooden towers watching over fertile plains. Beyond them are the great cities where artisans, warriors, monks, nobles, and merchants live side by side, each following lives very different from your own. Yet despite these differences, certain rhythms remain familiar everywhere. The seasons still govern the harvest. Temple bells still greet the morning. Families still gather around evening hearths. Children still learn by watching their elders. The landscape may change. The values often remain the same. Toward evening, the travelers prepare to continue their journeys. The merchant adjusts the rope securing his bundles. The monk bows gratefully before returning to the mountain road. The pilgrim tightens his straw sandals with slow, practiced hands. Soon they disappear among the cedar trees, their figures gradually swallowed by the winding path. The village grows quiet once more. Only their footprints remain upon the damp earth. As you return toward the rice fields, you realize that you know more about your own home because of their stories. The wider world has not made the village seem smaller. Instead, it has revealed how carefully your community fits within something much larger. The mountains no longer feel like barriers. They feel like gentle guardians, protecting a peaceful valley while allowing ideas, people, and traditions to pass through from time to time. As the sun slips behind the western hills, warm light spreads across the paddies one final time. The young rice plants ripple gently beneath the evening breeze. Frogs begin their nightly chorus. Smoke rises once again from every farmhouse. You pause for a long moment beside the familiar irrigation channel. Somewhere beyond these mountains, castles stand watch, ships cross wide bays, monks chant beneath towering temple roofs, and merchants bargain in crowded markets. Yet here, water continues flowing quietly through the terraces. Children still laugh beside the village well. Neighbors still greet one another at dawn. Life remains beautifully ordinary. You understand now that history is not shaped only in famous capitals or upon battlefields. It is also shaped here, in places where no chronicler records each sunrise. The countless villages scattered across medieval Japan feed the cities, supply the temples, support the roads, and preserve traditions that endure for generations. Without ordinary people, the extraordinary could never exist. As darkness settles gently over the valley, the evenings grow cooler. The wind carries a sharper edge from the mountains. Before long, the first leaves will begin to fall, and the warmth of summer will quietly give way to the long challenges of winter, a season that will test every lesson you have learned since waking in this peaceful valley. Chapter 13: The Long Winter. Autumn arrives so gently that, at first, you almost fail to notice. One morning, the mist lingering above the rice paddies feels just a little cooler against your face. The breeze that once carried the sweet scent of growing rice now carries the fragrance of dry leaves and cedar bark. High in the surrounding hills, the first maples begin to exchange their summer green for shades of amber, crimson, and deep gold. The valley is preparing for winter. So are its people. Unlike the busy days of planting or the joyful celebrations of the harvest festivals, this preparation unfolds quietly over many weeks. There is no single moment when everyone suddenly announces that winter has arrived. Instead, every small task whispers the same message. Be ready. You step outside the farmhouse shortly after dawn. The air is crisp enough that your breath forms pale clouds before disappearing into the morning light. Dew still clings to the grasses, but now it lingers much longer than it did during summer. The sun climbs more slowly above the eastern mountains, and the long shadows of the cedar trees stretch across the fields well into the morning. The rice harvest has been completed. Only short golden stubble remains where green stalks once swayed in the breeze. Bundles of harvested rice hang beneath simple wooden drying racks, protected from unexpected rain while the grain finishes curing before it is stored. Looking across the valley, the fields appear strangely peaceful. The endless rhythm of planting, weeding, and tending has finally slowed. Yet the work has not ended. It has simply changed. Every family understands that the months ahead will offer fewer opportunities to gather food. What is not prepared now may not exist when snow covers the mountain paths. The first task is firewood. You join several neighbors walking toward the cedar forest carrying ropes, axes, and woven baskets. The trail that seemed cool and welcoming during summer now lies carpeted with dry leaves that rustle softly beneath every step. The forest itself has changed. Sunlight reaches farther through branches slowly surrendering their foliage. Mushrooms that flourished during the warm rains have become scarce, while the quiet calls of birds seem fewer with each passing week. An experienced woodcutter leads the way. He does not swing his axe at the nearest tree. Instead, he studies the forest carefully. Dead trunks are gathered first. Storm-damaged branches are collected before healthy trees are considered. Young cedars continue growing untouched. The oldest trees standing upon steep slopes remain where they are, their roots holding the mountainside together against winter rains and spring floods. The forest is harvested with patience. Its future matters just as much as the present. By midday, neat bundles of firewood are tied with twisted straw rope and carried back toward the village. Each load feels heavy upon your shoulders. Yet everyone smiles quietly. Every stack added beside the farmhouse promises warmth during the cold nights ahead. The growing pile beside your home becomes almost comforting to look at. It is a visible measure of preparation. Nearby, other families continue their own work. Women spread sliced daikon radishes upon woven mats to dry beneath the autumn sun. Strings of mushrooms hang beneath the deep eaves of thatched roofs where cool air circulates freely. Soybeans are sorted with careful hands before being stored inside sturdy wooden containers. Nothing is hurried. Food preserved carefully now may sustain an entire household months later. Inside the farmhouse, large earthen jars are opened one by one. Pickled vegetables prepared during warmer months are inspected for any sign of spoilage. Fresh layers of salt are added where needed. Lids are sealed once more with quiet satisfaction. These simple jars contain more than food. They contain security. Outside, children gather fallen chestnuts beneath towering trees while laughing as spiny husks tumble around their feet. Older boys carry bundles of dried grass that will be used to repair worn sections of the roof before heavy snow begins to fall. Even the youngest members of the village understand that winter preparation belongs to everyone. No hands are too small to help. As the days shorten, another task becomes increasingly important. The farmhouse itself must be made ready. You climb carefully onto the roof beside several neighbors. Fresh bundles of thatch are secured wherever summer storms have loosened the older layers. Every knot is tightened. Every weak place is strengthened. A single overlooked gap could allow melting snow to drip steadily into the house for weeks. The walls receive similar attention. Cracks in the packed clay are repaired before icy winds find their way inside. Paper screens covering the windows are replaced where they have grown thin. Simple improvements, made one by one, gradually transform the house into a shelter capable of enduring another winter. Even the hearth is prepared. Ashes are carefully removed. The chimney opening is inspected. Extra kindling is stacked close enough that no one must step outside during heavy snowfall to keep the fire alive. The hearth is more than a place for cooking. It will soon become the heart of every evening. As temperatures continue falling, families spend more hours gathered around its warmth. Stories become longer. Songs are remembered. Tools are repaired. Children learn skills that busy farming seasons leave little time to teach. Winter slows the hands enough for knowledge to pass quietly between generations. One evening, while sitting beside the fire, your grandfather points toward the mountains beyond the village. Already their highest peaks wear a thin dusting of white. The snow has begun, he says softly. No one seems surprised. Winter never arrives unexpectedly. The mountains announce it weeks in advance. The villagers have been listening. A few mornings later, frost appears for the first time. Each blade of grass sparkles beneath the sunrise. The rice paddies, once filled with warm reflections of summer skies, now lie still and silent. Thin sheets of ice form along the edges of irrigation channels before melting beneath the midday sun. The air smells wonderfully clean. Crisp. Almost sweet. The sounds of the valley have changed as well. The constant chorus of cicadas has disappeared. Frogs have fallen silent. Only the occasional call of a crow echoes across the open fields. Nature itself seems to be drawing a long, peaceful breath before sleep. Then, one quiet evening, it begins. At first, only a few snowflakes drift lazily through the air. They melt as soon as they touch the damp ground. Children rush outside laughing, stretching their hands toward the sky. The elders simply smile. They know more is coming. By morning, the valley has been transformed. Every rooftop wears a blanket of white. The bamboo groves bend gently beneath the fresh weight of snow. Cedar branches glisten beneath soft winter light, while every familiar path seems newly drawn across the landscape. The world has become quieter. Snow absorbs sound in a way rain never can. Footsteps become muffled. Voices seem gentler. Even the flowing river moves with a slower, calmer voice. You step outside and look across the valley. It is breathtaking. Beautiful enough to make you forget, for a moment, how demanding the coming months will be. The fields sleep beneath their snowy blanket. The mountains stand silent against a pale winter sky. Smoke rises straight upward from every farmhouse, promising warmth waiting within. Winter has arrived. It is peaceful. It is beautiful. And it will quietly test every lesson the village has spent the entire year learning. Tomorrow, you will discover that surviving the cold is only part of the challenge. When illness visits a medieval village, there are no hospitals waiting beyond the mountains, no pharmacies beside the road, and no medicines arriving overnight. Instead, families must rely upon herbs, experience, faith, and one another as they face sickness with patience, courage, and hope. Chapter 14: Illness Without Modern Medicine. The snow has now settled comfortably over the valley. Each morning, the rice paddies lie hidden beneath a smooth white blanket, their carefully tended terraces almost impossible to recognize beneath the winter silence. The irrigation channels still flow beneath thin sheets of ice, carrying mountain water that never truly stops its journey, even during the coldest days. Smoke rises steadily from every farmhouse. Without the warmth of the hearth, winter would be far more than uncomfortable. It would be dangerous. You spend more hours indoors now. The shorter days leave less time for work outside, and evenings begin long before they did in summer. Around the fire, family members mend clothing, carve wooden tools, weave baskets from bamboo prepared during warmer months, and tell stories that seem to grow richer each time they are shared. The house feels peaceful. Yet winter also brings something else. The villagers speak of it quietly. Almost reluctantly. Illness. The first sign is so ordinary that no one notices it immediately. A young boy from the neighboring farmhouse does not come outside to help carry firewood. His mother explains that he has a fever. She smiles gently as she speaks, hoping it will pass after a day of rest. Such fevers are common during the cold months. Most disappear as quietly as they arrive. But everyone watches carefully. In medieval Japan, sickness is a familiar visitor. No family escapes it forever. There are no physicians waiting in every village. No shelves filled with medicines prepared in distant factories. Healing depends upon knowledge gathered slowly over generations, careful observation, and sometimes a measure of fortune. The following morning, your grandmother prepares a warm herbal drink before breakfast. She opens a small wooden chest where dried leaves, roots, flowers, and bark have been stored with remarkable care. Some were gathered from the cedar forests in spring. Others from sunny mountain meadows during summer. A few came from merchants who traveled through the valley months earlier. Each herb has its own purpose. One eases a cough. Another settles an uneasy stomach. A third may reduce fever. None are considered miraculous. Instead, they are trusted companions that sometimes help the body find its own strength again. She crushes several dried leaves with a smooth stone before adding them to hot water drawn from the kettle above the hearth. The steam carries an earthy fragrance that fills the room. The taste is bitter. Yet no one complains. Even children understand that unpleasant flavors often accompany useful remedies. Later that day, you accompany your grandfather to visit the sick boy. The farmhouse is quiet. His mother sits beside him, gently wiping his forehead with a damp cloth while the fire burns steadily nearby. The room is warm. Fresh water rests within easy reach. The boy sleeps peacefully between brief moments of wakefulness. There is little anyone can do except offer comfort, nourishment, and careful attention. Healing often requires patience. The village elder arrives carrying another bundle of medicinal herbs. He examines the child's breathing, asks gentle questions, and quietly reassures the family. His knowledge has not come from books alone. It has been shaped by decades of experience. He remembers which remedies eased similar illnesses years before. He remembers which signs suggested recovery. He also remembers, with quiet sadness, the times when nothing anyone offered was enough. Experience teaches both hope and humility. As you walk home through the snowy village, you begin to notice how carefully people protect themselves during winter. Wet clothing is dried immediately beside the hearth. Children are reminded to cover their heads before stepping into icy winds. Warm soups are served more often than cold foods. Families gather closely around the fire not only for comfort but for warmth that keeps the bitter air from settling into their bones. Simple habits become quiet forms of protection. One afternoon, the temple bell rings several times outside its usual rhythm. The sound spreads gently across the valley. You soon learn that an elderly woman has passed away after a long illness. No one reacts with surprise. She had lived many years beyond what many people expected. Still, sorrow settles softly over the village. Neighbors quietly leave their own work to help the family prepare for the funeral. Meals are brought to the grieving household. Firewood is stacked without being requested. The elderly woman's fields, though resting beneath snow, will be cared for when spring returns. Grief is never carried alone. The funeral itself is simple. Monks chant calm sutras while incense rises slowly into the winter air. Family members bow before a modest altar decorated with evergreen branches and candles whose gentle flames seem almost motionless inside the still room. Children watch respectfully from behind their parents, learning not only about loss but about remembrance. Death is not hidden from them. It is accepted as part of life's turning seasons. After the ceremony, stories begin to replace tears. The villagers remember the woman's laughter during harvest festivals. They recall her skill at weaving baskets. They smile while speaking of the herbal remedies she once prepared for countless children who had fallen ill over the years. In this way, memory itself becomes a form of healing. As the weeks pass, the young boy gradually recovers. His fever fades. His appetite returns. One cold morning, you see him once again carrying a bundle of kindling much too large for his small shoulders. The villagers greet him with quiet smiles but little ceremony. Recovery is welcomed with gratitude rather than celebration. Life simply continues. Not every illness ends so gently. Throughout medieval Japan, epidemics sometimes pass through villages with frightening speed. Smallpox, dysentery, influenza-like fevers, and other diseases are poorly understood. People know they spread. They recognize familiar symptoms. But the invisible causes remain unknown. When sickness arrives in great numbers, monks offer prayers, families isolate the ill as best they can, and herbal knowledge is shared freely among neighbors. Sometimes these efforts help. Sometimes they do not. There are limits to every generation's understanding. Yet even in uncertainty, compassion rarely disappears. You notice that the people of the village judge one another not by whether they can cure illness, but by how faithfully they care for those who suffer. A bowl of warm soup. Fresh water. A hand resting gently upon a fevered forehead. Quiet company during long nights. These gifts require no special training. Only kindness. One evening, your grandfather stirs the fire while snow falls steadily outside. The flames reflect softly in his thoughtful eyes. He tells you that medicine changes with every generation. Some remedies once trusted are later forgotten. New ones are discovered. Knowledge grows little by little. But caring for one another, he says, placing another log upon the fire, that never grows old. His words remain with you long after the room falls silent. You look around the farmhouse. The walls still smell faintly of cedar smoke. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the rafters. Children sleep peacefully beneath warm blankets. Outside, snow continues drifting gently across the valley. The people here cannot control every illness. They cannot prevent every loss. But they face both with quiet dignity, sharing burdens that would be impossible to carry alone. As winter slowly begins its long journey towards spring, another danger quietly waits beyond the snow. Not sickness this time, but the uncertainty of the land itself. Too much rain. Too little rain. Floods, fires, failed harvests, and empty granaries. Tomorrow, you will discover that nature's greatest challenges are often not dramatic moments of destruction, but slow trials that test an entire community's patience, preparation, and resilience over many difficult months. Chapter 15: Famine, Floods, and Fire. By the time winter begins to loosen its grip, the valley has grown very quiet. The snow no longer falls each day, yet patches of white still linger beneath the cedar trees where sunlight seldom reaches. During the afternoons, droplets of melting ice fall steadily from the thatched roofs, tapping softly into wooden buckets placed beneath the eaves. The air carries the scent of damp earth once again, and somewhere beneath the frozen ground, spring is already beginning its patient return. The villagers welcome these small signs with cautious optimism. They know better than to celebrate too soon. The changing season does not promise safety. It simply brings new challenges. You have now lived through nearly an entire cycle of the year. You have learned when to plant, when to harvest, when to preserve food, and when to rest beside the hearth. Yet the greatest lesson has never been about following the calendar. It has been about accepting uncertainty. No matter how carefully a family prepares, the natural world always has the final word. One morning, while walking beside the irrigation channels, you notice the river running higher than usual. Snowmelt from the mountains has begun to swell its banks. The water moves faster now, carrying broken branches and smooth stones downstream with surprising strength. Farmers stop their work from time to time, quietly watching the current. No one speaks of danger. Not yet. But everyone pays attention. Living in medieval Japan means learning to observe small changes before they become great ones. Several days later, heavy rain arrives. At first, it is almost comforting. The sound of water falling upon the thatched roof reminds you of gentle spring mornings from many months ago. Mist gathers once more over the paddies, and every field drinks deeply after the long winter. The villagers continue their work without concern. Rain is necessary. Without it, the rice cannot grow. But the clouds do not move on. The rain continues through the night. Then another day. Then another. The quiet murmur of the river slowly becomes a roar. By the fourth morning, the water has climbed beyond its usual banks. The current pushes against bridge supports with frightening force, carrying whole tree trunks that twist and roll like floating logs of driftwood. The village responds immediately. Not with panic. With purpose. Men and women carry woven baskets filled with stones to strengthen the most vulnerable sections of the riverbank. Others clear fallen branches from irrigation gates before they can block the flow of water into the paddies. Children are given smaller but equally important tasks, carrying ropes, gathering tools, and delivering warm food to those working in the rain. Every person becomes part of the effort. The river cannot be stopped. But perhaps it can be guided. You spend the entire day ankle-deep in cold mud beside your neighbors. Rain soaks your clothing until every movement feels heavy. Hands grow numb. Faces become streaked with wet earth. No one complains. Words are saved for instructions that truly matter. By evening, the rain finally begins to weaken. The river remains swollen, but the village has endured. Several sections of the fields have been damaged. One footbridge has disappeared entirely. A few irrigation walls will need rebuilding. Compared with what might have happened, the losses feel merciful. The following days become a season of repair. Broken fences are rebuilt before wandering animals can enter the paddies. Silt carried by the flood is carefully removed from irrigation channels using simple wooden shovels. Timber salvaged from the river is dried and reshaped into replacement beams. The work is slow. Patient. No family rebuilds alone. The damage belongs to everyone. So does the recovery. As spring turns toward summer, another kind of worry quietly appears. The rains stop. At first, no one notices. Several warm, sunny days are welcomed after the long damp weeks. The fields glisten beneath bright skies. Children play happily along the dry paths. But as 1 week becomes 2, the river begins shrinking once more. Its familiar song grows softer. The paddies require constant water. Without it, young rice plants begin to struggle. The village gathers beside the irrigation channels. Wooden gates are adjusted carefully so that every family receives enough water to keep their fields alive. There are no easy answers. When resources become limited, fairness matters more than comfort. The headman walks from field to field each morning, checking the flow with experienced eyes. Arguments are remarkably rare. Everyone understands the truth. If one family takes more than its share today, another family may lose its harvest tomorrow. Cooperation is no longer merely a virtue. It becomes survival itself. Fortunately, summer storms eventually return. The paddies fill once again. The rice survives. Not every year is so fortunate. The oldest villagers remember seasons when the rains failed entirely. Harvests withered beneath relentless heat. Families survived by gathering wild plants, grinding acorns into coarse flour after careful preparation, and stretching every remaining grain of rice as far as possible. Some villages were forced to leave their homes in search of better conditions elsewhere. Others endured only through the generosity of neighboring communities. Those difficult years remain alive in memory long after the fields recover. They shape the caution with which every successful harvest is treated. One evening, while helping repair a storage shed, you notice your grandfather studying the wooden roof with unusual care. He replaces several weathered beams, then inspects the chimney before carefully clearing dry leaves from around the building. You ask why he seems so concerned. He answers with a single word. Fire. Until now, you have thought mostly about water. But fire is every bit as dangerous. Nearly every building in the village is made of wood, bamboo, straw, and paper. The hearth that warms the family throughout winter can become a terrible enemy if neglected. A single spark carried by the wind may leap from one roof to another in moments. During dry weather, an entire village could disappear within hours. That is why buckets filled with water stand beside nearly every home. Why chimneys are inspected so often. Why children are taught from an early age to respect the hearth. One afternoon, a small accident proves the wisdom of these habits. A cooking fire sends a shower of sparks onto a bundle of dry straw stacked too close to the house. Within moments, smoke begins rising. Before flames can spread, neighbors rush toward the house carrying water from nearby wells and irrigation channels. Buckets pass quickly from hand to hand. The fire is extinguished almost as soon as it begins. Afterward, there is no anger. Only quiet relief. The straw can be replaced. The farmhouse remains standing. The lesson has been learned once again. That evening, as sunset paints the valley in gentle shades of gold and rose, you walk beside the repaired riverbank. The water now flows peacefully once more, reflecting drifting clouds as though it had never threatened the village at all. Birds skim low across its surface. Dragonflies return to the reeds. Nature rarely holds grudges. It simply continues. You begin to understand why the people here speak of the land with such deep respect. The same river that nourishes the rice fields can also sweep them away. The same rain that fills the paddies can flood entire valleys. The same hearth that protects a family through winter can destroy generations of work in a single night. None of these forces are evil. They simply follow their own nature. Survival depends not upon mastering them, but upon preparing for them with humility, patience, and cooperation. As darkness settles across the valley, the first evening insects begin singing once again. The rice plants sway gently beneath a warm summer breeze, looking healthy despite all they have endured. You have witnessed how fragile life can be. Yet you have also witnessed something equally powerful. A community that faces every hardship together. Tomorrow, your own hair will seem a little grayer, your hands a little more weathered, and your steps a little slower. The passing seasons will reveal how people in medieval Japan faced the quiet realities of growing old, preserving wisdom, and preparing the next generation to continue a way of life that depended as much upon memory as it did upon strength. Chapter 16: Growing Old in Medieval Japan. Another spring has come to the valley. The cherry trees scattered along the riverbanks bloom once again, covering their dark branches with delicate clouds of pale pink blossoms. Petals drift lazily across the irrigation channels, floating beside the same water that nourished last year's harvest. The frogs have returned to the paddies. The bamboo groves sing with the familiar voice of the wind. The village seems unchanged. And yet, you have changed. Your hands no longer look as they did when you first awoke in this farmhouse many months ago. The skin has grown rough from countless hours gripping wooden hoes, carrying heavy buckets, weaving baskets, repairing fences, and gathering firewood from the mountains. Fine lines of work trace your palms like tiny maps of the seasons you have survived. The people around you notice these things without ever mentioning them. In medieval Japan, growing older is rarely marked by grand celebrations. It is measured quietly. One harvest follows another. Children become young adults. Parents become grandparents. The village itself remembers the passing of time through the faces gathered around the evening hearth. You begin your morning as always, stepping into the cool air before sunrise. Mist drifts gently across the paddies, softening every reflection beneath the awakening sky. As you walk toward the fields, you notice that an elderly farmer is already standing beside the irrigation gate. His back is bent more deeply than it was last year. His movements are slower. Yet his eyes still follow the flow of water with remarkable attention. Without touching a single tool, he notices something the younger workers have overlooked. A small branch has become lodged beneath one of the wooden gates, reducing the water flowing into the lowest terrace. It is a tiny problem. Easy to miss. Easy to solve. The younger farmers thank him quietly before removing the obstruction. The old man smiles. He has not become weaker because he can no longer lift the heaviest loads. He has become valuable in different ways. This realization begins appearing everywhere you look. An elderly woman no longer spends long hours planting rice knee-deep in cold water. Instead, she teaches children how to recognize medicinal herbs gathered from the mountains. Another elder sits patiently beneath the eaves of his home, repairing woven fishing nets with fingers that still remember movements learned decades ago. A grandmother shows young girls how to preserve vegetables so they will remain edible through the coming winter. A retired carpenter carefully sharpens tools while explaining which cedar trees produce the strongest beams. Knowledge has become their greatest harvest. The village depends upon it just as surely as it depends upon rice. One afternoon, you accompany several children into the bamboo grove. The youngest race ahead, eager to fill their baskets with fallen branches. The oldest among the group walks more slowly beside an elderly grandfather carrying little more than a walking stick. Along the way, he pauses often. Not because he is tired. Because every few steps there is something worth explaining. This bamboo, he says softly, resting his hand upon a tall green stalk, grew after the great storm when I was your age. A little farther along, he points toward a cedar standing alone upon a rocky hillside. My father planted that tree before I was born. Near a small spring, he kneels carefully. This water has never frozen completely, not even during the hardest winters. The children listen. Not every lesson concerns farming. Some concern memory. The landscape itself becomes a living history book, read aloud by those who have watched it change through many seasons. Later that week, a young couple welcomes their first child into the village. News spreads quietly but quickly. Neighbors arrive carrying small gifts. A woven blanket. Fresh vegetables. A carefully carved wooden spoon. Nothing expensive. Everything useful. The arrival of a child belongs to the whole community. Many hands will help raise this little one. As you watch the family gather together, you begin thinking about the generations surrounding every ordinary day. The newborn has everything to learn. The parents carry the greatest responsibilities. The grandparents carry the deepest memories. Each depends upon the others. No generation stands alone. That evening, after supper, your grandfather invites you to sit beside the hearth. The fire burns steadily, casting warm light across the familiar wooden walls. Outside, spring rain taps gently upon the thatched roof. Inside, the room smells faintly of cedar smoke and freshly cooked rice. For a long while, he simply watches the flames. Then he begins speaking. He tells stories you have never heard before. How his own grandfather survived a flood that reshaped the river many decades ago. How the village rebuilt after a fire destroyed nearly half its homes. How a single wise woman once recognized the first signs of disease early enough to save many families. None of these events appear in official records. No famous chronicler wrote them down. Yet without them, the village you know today would not exist. History lives not only in scrolls. It lives in memory. As the weeks pass, you notice another quiet truth about growing older. The elders are never hurried. When they walk through the village, younger people naturally slow their pace to match them. Heavy loads are carried without being requested. Doors are opened before they are reached. Respect is shown not through dramatic gestures but through countless ordinary acts of kindness. Old age is not viewed as a burden. It is recognized as the natural destination toward which everyone is traveling. Even so, aging is not easy. One morning, the elderly farmer who always inspected the irrigation channels remains at home. His knees have become too painful for long walks. The younger farmers visit him that evening. Not because they need instructions. Simply because his company still matters. They ask his opinion about the coming planting season. He studies the weather outside before quietly offering advice. His body may have slowed. His judgment remains sharp. The village continues to seek it. Summer gradually returns. The rice fields once again fill with shimmering water. Children who seemed so small when you first met them now move confidently among the paddies, carrying tools that once appeared far too large for their hands. Without realizing it, you have watched them grow. They learned not through classrooms or written lessons, but by living each season beside parents, grandparents, neighbors, and friends. Every day has been a lesson. Every task has been a teacher. One evening, you climb a gentle hillside overlooking the valley. The sun is setting behind distant mountains, bathing the landscape in soft golden light. Smoke rises from every farmhouse. Temple bells echo faintly across the fields. The same river still winds through the valley, just as it did when you first arrived. Looking down, you understand something that has remained hidden beneath every chapter of this journey. No single person truly owns this village. Each generation borrows it for a little while. They repair the irrigation channels built by those who came before. They plant cedar saplings whose shade they themselves may never enjoy. They teach children who will one day care for the fields after they are gone. The village survives because people think beyond their own lifetimes. As twilight settles gently across the paddies, fireflies begin rising once more from the edges of the water. Their tiny lights flicker quietly among the reeds, appearing and disappearing like distant memories. You realize that the greatest strength of medieval Japan has never been its castles, its warriors, or its famous leaders. It has always rested in ordinary people willing to preserve knowledge across generations. Tomorrow, your year in the village will begin drawing to its close. Looking back across the changing seasons, you will begin to understand why this way of life endured for centuries, and why its quiet balance between people, community, and nature became one of the strongest foundations of medieval Japan itself. Chapter 17: Why Medieval Japan Worked. A full year has almost passed. When you first opened your eyes beneath the thatched roof of the farmhouse, everything felt unfamiliar. The smell of wood smoke clinging to your clothes, the rough texture of straw sandals beneath your feet, the endless rhythm of planting and harvesting, the quiet customs observed without explanation, all of it belonged to a world that seemed impossibly distant. Now the valley feels like home. You know which section of the river freezes first each winter. You recognize the voice of the temple bell carried differently by summer air than by cold autumn mornings. You can tell the arrival of rain simply by the scent drifting down from the cedar-covered hills. The bamboo groves no longer seem mysterious. The winding footpaths no longer require thought. The village has slowly become part of you. As dawn breaks over the paddies, you walk alone toward the highest terrace overlooking the valley. Morning mist lies gently upon the water, turning every field into a sheet of pale silver. The young rice plants sway almost imperceptibly in the breeze, while dragonflies skim the surface in graceful arcs. Behind you, the first smoke begins rising from the farmhouses as families prepare another ordinary day. Nothing extraordinary is happening. And that is precisely the point. The greatest achievement of medieval Japan was not that remarkable events occurred every day. It was that, despite floods, harsh winters, illness, and uncertainty, ordinary life continued. Season after season. Generation after generation. You begin thinking about everything you have witnessed. The irrigation channels that quietly carry mountain water across the valley. The careful timing required to plant rice before the rains. The forests harvested without stripping the mountains bare. The baskets woven during winter evenings. The festivals that renewed friendships after months of labor. The temple bells reminding people to pause amid their work. The elders passing knowledge to children beside the hearth. Each part appears simple when viewed alone. Together, they create something remarkably resilient. The village works because every task supports another. The forests protect the streams. The streams feed the paddies. The paddies nourish the people. The people care for the forests. Nothing stands entirely apart. You kneel beside one of the irrigation channels. Clear water slips silently between smooth stones before disappearing toward the lower terraces. Someone built this channel long before you arrived. Someone repaired it after every flood. Someone removed leaves before they could block the flow. Because of their quiet efforts, today's fields remain fertile. You realize that much of medieval Japan was built by people whose names have been forgotten. Their work survives even when their stories do not. Later that morning, the village gathers to repair a footbridge damaged by recent rains. No one has ordered them to come. No reward has been promised. Yet nearly everyone arrives. Carpenters shape replacement beams. Children carry wooden pegs. Older women prepare warm meals for those working beside the stream. Monks from the nearby temple lend their hands without ceremony. The bridge belongs to everyone. Its repair belongs to everyone as well. Watching the work unfold, you understand that cooperation here is not an ideal discussed in speeches. It is a daily habit. Without it, the village simply could not endure. As the bridge slowly takes shape, your thoughts wander to the local lord whose steward visited months earlier. At first, authority seemed distant and mysterious. Yet over time, you came to see that medieval society rested upon countless relationships of mutual obligation. Farmers provided food. Craftsmen created tools. Merchants carried goods. Monks preserved learning and spiritual traditions. Village leaders organized daily affairs. Warriors protected roads, estates, and political order, though imperfectly and not always peacefully. Each role depended upon others. The system was unequal. Some people possessed greater power than others. Taxes could be burdensome. Life could be harsh. Yet despite these realities, the countryside continued functioning because ordinary people understood responsibilities as clearly as they understood rights. No family truly stood alone. During your year, you never saw a farmer produce every necessity without help. The blacksmith relied upon charcoal makers. The charcoal makers relied upon foresters. The foresters relied upon farmers who supplied rice. Even the monks depended upon villagers for food while offering prayers, education, and guidance in return. The web of relationships stretched quietly across the landscape like the roots of an ancient cedar hidden beneath the soil. At midday, you climb once more into the surrounding hills. From this familiar viewpoint, the valley appears almost unchanged from the day you first saw it. Rice terraces curve gently along the slopes. Thatched roofs rest beneath towering trees. The river glitters beneath the afternoon sun before disappearing into forests beyond your sight. It is easy to mistake this peaceful scene for something untouched. Yet every part bears the mark of patient human hands. The terraces were carved one layer at a time. The irrigation channels dug with wooden tools. The forests managed carefully through generations. Even the paths winding between homes have been shaped by countless footsteps. Nature and people have not competed here. They have negotiated. Each season teaches the same lesson again. Take only what you can replace. Repair what becomes damaged. Prepare before hardship arrives. Share knowledge freely. Think beyond your own lifetime. These principles are never written upon signs. They live in habit. As afternoon drifts toward evening, children gather beside the river. Some practice weaving simple ropes from rice straw. Others learn to cast small fishing nets beneath the patient guidance of their grandparents. No formal lesson is announced. Learning simply happens while living. A mistake is corrected gently. A skill is repeated until it becomes natural. Watching them, you realize that the village never stops teaching. Education is woven into everyday life itself. The same is true of faith. The shrine beneath the cedars continues receiving quiet offerings. The temple bell still marks the passing hours. Neither demands constant attention. Instead, they gently remind people that gratitude, humility, and remembrance belong alongside labor. Work feeds the body. Meaning nourishes the spirit. One without the other leaves life incomplete. As sunset paints the valley in warm amber light, you find yourself standing once again beside the farmhouse where your journey began. The wooden walls still smell faintly of cedar and smoke. The roof has weathered another year. The family prepares the evening meal with the same quiet efficiency that once seemed unfamiliar. Nothing feels remarkable. Everything feels precious. You finally understand why this society endured for centuries. Not because it was perfect. It was not. Life remained uncertain. Storms still destroyed harvests. Illness still claimed loved ones. Power was unevenly distributed. Many people worked harder than modern minds can easily imagine. Yet beneath those hardships lay something extraordinarily stable. A culture that understood seasons. A community that valued cooperation over isolation. Families that preserved knowledge across generations. A deep respect for the natural world that made survival possible. These quiet foundations held the countryside together long after individual lives had ended. Night settles slowly across the valley. Lanterns glow behind paper windows. The frogs begin singing once again beside the paddies. Above, the stars emerge one by one, just as they have for countless generations before yours. You look across the peaceful landscape with new eyes. This village has taught you far more than how to grow rice. It has shown you how an entire civilization quietly sustained itself through patience, memory, shared responsibility, and an enduring partnership with the land. Tomorrow, as your year finally draws to its end, you will ask the question that has lingered since the beginning of this journey. After everything you have learned, after every season you have lived through, could you truly adapt to a life like this? Or would the quiet demands of medieval Japan prove greater than they first appeared? Chapter 18. Could you actually adapt? The final season begins quietly. There is no dramatic moment announcing that your year in medieval Japan is coming to an end. No great ceremony. No final bell. No single sunrise that feels different from all the others. Instead, the valley simply continues. The same mist rises above the rice paddies. The same mountain streams carry clear water toward the fields. The same bamboo forests sway gently whenever the wind passes through their hollow branches. Life does not pause because one person has reached the end of a journey. That may be the first lesson this world has taught you. You arrived expecting hardship. And there was hardship. You expected a life filled with struggle. And there was struggle. But what you did not expect was how much of life was built from quiet moments. A warm bowl of rice shared beside the hearth. The sound of rain falling upon a thatched roof. A neighbor arriving without being asked when a repair is needed. Children laughing beside irrigation channels. The distant echo of a temple bell at dawn. The smell of cedar smoke drifting through the evening air. The beauty of medieval Japan was not found because life was easy. It was found because people learned to appreciate small comforts in a world where nothing could be taken for granted. You walk through the village one final time. The path beneath your straw sandals feels familiar now. You no longer need to think about where the stones become uneven. Your feet remember. The farmhouse roofs that once seemed strange now look welcoming. The wooden fences that once appeared fragile now represent generations of careful maintenance. The faces of your neighbors are no longer strangers. They are the people who helped you survive. You stop beside the rice fields where you first learned the rhythm of cultivation. At the beginning, the work seemed impossible. The flooded paddies were cold. Your back ached from bending for hours. Your hands struggled to perform movements that experienced farmers completed without thought. Planting rice was not simply placing seeds into soil. It required understanding water, weather, timing, and patience. A mistake made in spring could remain visible months later during harvest. The farmers around you were not merely laborious. They were experts. Their knowledge was written not in books, but in their bodies. They knew the smell of approaching rain. They understood when a field needed more water. They recognized unhealthy plants before disease spread. They carried the memory of countless previous seasons. You realize now that surviving here would require becoming a student of the land. Not for a few weeks. Not for a single harvest. For an entire lifetime. The same is true everywhere you look. The fisherman does not simply throw a net into the river. He understands currents, seasons, and the behavior of fish. The carpenter does not simply cut wood. She understands the nature of each tree, how it will age, bend, and endure. The herbalist does not simply gather plants. She carries decades of knowledge about forests and healing. Every person possesses skills that modern outsiders might overlook. Skills developed through years of attention. You think about your first winter. The snow-covered village had seemed peaceful from the outside. Beautiful, even. But beauty did not make it easy. The cold entered through every weakness in the house. Firewood disappeared faster than expected. Food stores had to be carefully measured. A simple illness could become dangerous. The winter taught you something important. Survival was not about strength alone. It was about preparation. The villagers who endured were not necessarily the strongest. They were the ones who understood what was coming. They prepared months before the snow arrived. They stored food. They repaired roofs. They gathered wood. They listened to older generations. They respected the lessons written into the seasons. You look toward the mountains where the snow still rests upon the highest peaks. Those mountains no longer seem like obstacles. They seem like teachers. They have taught patience. The rivers taught humility. The forests taught restraint. The fields taught discipline. The village taught cooperation. Then you consider the question that has followed you since the beginning. Could you actually adapt? The answer is complicated. Perhaps you could survive a few days. You could sleep on the floor. You could eat simple meals. You could carry water from the stream. You could walk the mountain paths. You could endure the discomfort of unfamiliar surroundings. But surviving one full year would require something much deeper. It would require changing the way you understand time itself. In the modern world, people often measure progress through speed. Faster travel. Faster communication. Faster production. Here, life moves according to different measurements. A rice plant cannot be rushed. A cedar tree cannot be hurried. A skill cannot be learned overnight. A relationship cannot be replaced instantly. Everything depends upon patience. The village does not ask, "How quickly can this be done?" It asks, "What is the right way to do this so it will endure?" That difference shapes everything. You think about the evenings spent beside the hearth. At first, the darkness felt endless. Without the distractions you once knew, hours seemed longer. But gradually, something changed. You began noticing things you had ignored before. The sound of wind moving through bamboo. The changing color of firelight upon wooden walls. The expressions on people's faces as they told stories. The quiet satisfaction after completing a difficult task. The world became smaller. But perhaps it also became clearer. Tomorrow, your journey will reach its final reflection. You will look beyond this single village and understand the role of ordinary farmers, craftsmen, fishermen, and families in shaping the history of medieval Japan. Because kingdoms may be remembered through rulers and warriors. But civilizations survive because countless unnamed people wake before sunrise, work beneath the changing sky, and quietly build the world that comes after them. Chapter 19: Why Ordinary People Shaped History. The morning begins like every other morning. A thin veil of fog rests above the rice paddies. The mountains stand quietly beyond the valley, their peaks softened by the pale light of dawn. A rooster calls from somewhere behind a farmhouse. A wooden door slides open. A small fire is awakened beneath a cooking pot. The village begins another day. Nothing about this morning appears important. No famous warrior rides through the gates. No great lord arrives with a grand announcement. No battle is fought upon the nearby fields. And yet, this ordinary morning is exactly why this village matters. Because history is not only created by those whose names are remembered. It is also created by those whose names disappear. You step outside and watch a farmer preparing his tools beside the edge of the paddy. His movements are familiar now. Check the hoe. Repair the handle. Inspect the irrigation gate. Prepare for the day's work. He does not consider himself part of history. He is simply caring for his family. But generations after him will eat because of the work he performs today. The rice he grows will feed children. The straw left behind will become rope, roofing, animal bedding, and countless household materials. The fields he maintains will remain productive because he understands how to care for them. His contribution may never be written on a scroll. But it will shape the future. You look across the valley and begin noticing the countless invisible foundations supporting medieval Japan. A carpenter repairing a farmhouse roof. A woman preserving vegetables for winter. A fisherman repairing a torn net beside the river. A monk copying sacred texts by candlelight. A potter shaping clay into vessels used every day. A blacksmith creating tools that allow farmers to work. A child learning the traditions of the village. Each action appears small. Together, they create a civilization. For much of history, attention naturally follows powerful figures. Kings. Lords. Warriors. Generals. Their decisions can change the direction of entire regions. But power alone cannot build a society. A ruler may command. A warrior may protect. A leader may create laws. Yet none of these things matter without people who grow food, build homes, transport goods, raise children, and preserve knowledge. The foundation always rests below. Like the roots of an ancient cedar tree, hidden beneath the soil but supporting everything above. During your year in this valley, you have seen how much knowledge exists in ordinary life. The farmer understands water. The forester understands trees. The fisherman understands rivers. The craftsperson understands materials. The elder understands memory. None of these skills appeared suddenly. They were inherited. Improved. Passed forward. A child watching a parent work is participating in a chain that stretches backward through countless generations. The rice planted today carries the memory of every farmer who came before. The tools used today carry the knowledge of every craftsman who shaped similar tools in earlier centuries. The songs sung during festivals carry voices from people who lived hundreds of years ago. Culture survives because ordinary people continue repeating meaningful actions. As you walk toward the village shrine, you notice the old cedar tree standing beside the entrance. Its trunk is enormous. Its branches spread high above the wooden gate. The villagers say it was already ancient when their grandparents were young. No one alive today remembers who planted it. Perhaps no one planted it at all. Perhaps it simply grew from a seed carried by the wind. Yet everyone protects it. Why? Because it represents continuity. A reminder that life extends beyond a single generation. The same idea exists throughout the village. The irrigation channels. The footpaths. The farmhouses. The forests. The traditions. Everything is part of a conversation between the past and the future. Each generation receives something. Each generation leaves something behind. You think back to the beginning of your journey. When you first arrived, you saw medieval Japan through the eyes of an outsider. You noticed what was missing. No electricity. No modern transportation. No hospitals. No machines completing difficult tasks. It was easy to focus on what this world lacked. But after a year, your perspective has changed. Now you notice what it possessed. A deep understanding of seasons. A powerful sense of responsibility. A relationship with nature built through observation. Communities where people depended upon one another. Knowledge carefully preserved through experience. Life was demanding. But it was not empty. The people here understood something that every civilization eventually learns. A society is not held together only by monuments. It is held together by habits. By people doing necessary things even when no one is watching. By parents teaching children. By neighbors helping neighbors. By individuals accepting responsibilities that benefit those they may never meet. You visit the market one final time before your journey ends. The same paths are filled with familiar activity. Merchants arrange their goods. Farmers exchange rice and vegetables. Craftsmen display their work. Travelers share stories from distant places. At first glance, it looks like a simple gathering. But now you see the complexity hidden beneath it. The market represents hundreds of connections. The farmer depends on the blacksmith. The blacksmith depends on charcoal makers. The merchant depends on roads and bridges. The temple depends on offerings. The village depends on cooperation. Every person exists within a web of relationships. Remove one thread, and the entire structure becomes weaker. As you leave the market, you hear the sound of a temple bell. The deep tone rolls across the valley. It sounds the same as it did when you first arrived. But you are not the same person who heard it then. You have learned that history is not only found in moments of dramatic change. Sometimes history is the decision to plant rice again after a flood. To rebuild after a fire. To repair a bridge after a storm. To teach a child a skill that will not be needed until decades later. These quiet acts rarely appear in stories. Yet they are the reason stories continue. As the sun sets, you return to the farmhouse one last time. The family gathers around the hearth. The meal is simple. Rice. Vegetables. A little fish. Nothing extraordinary. But you understand now that this meal represents thousands of hours of labor. Rain. Sunlight. Human effort. Community. Nature. All transformed into something that sustains life. Outside, the valley grows dark. Lanterns glow softly. The bamboo leaves move gently in the evening wind. The stars appear above the mountains. Tomorrow, you will take your final steps through this world. You will look back upon everything you have experienced, the beauty and the hardship, the simplicity and the struggle, the peaceful moments and the difficult ones. And you will finally answer the question that brought you here. Why wouldn't you survive a year in medieval Japan? Not because the people lacked comfort. Not because the land was without beauty. Not because life was only suffering. You would struggle because this world demanded something that cannot be learned quickly. It demanded a lifetime of knowledge. A lifetime of patience. A lifetime of understanding how to live with the seasons, the land, and the people around you. And that is why ordinary people shaped history. Because they were the ones who knew how to endure. Chapter 20, Why You Wouldn't Survive, and That's Okay. The final morning arrives quietly. There is no dramatic sunrise. No great announcement from the mountains. No moment when the entire valley recognizes that a journey has reached its end. The world simply wakes. A thin layer of mist rests upon the rice paddies. The first light touches the tops of the cedar trees. Water continues flowing through the irrigation channels. A farmer opens a wooden door. A child carries kindling toward the hearth. A temple bell sounds in the distance. Another ordinary day begins. And perhaps that is the most fitting ending. Because after everything you have experienced, you understand that medieval Japan was not defined by extraordinary moments. It was defined by ordinary ones. Thousands upon thousands of ordinary mornings. Thousands upon thousands of ordinary tasks. Thousands upon thousands of people quietly doing what was necessary to keep life moving forward. You stand beside the field where your journey began. The same earth rests beneath your feet. The same mountains rise beyond the valley. The same bamboo forests whisper in the wind. Yet you no longer see this landscape as simple. You now understand everything hidden within it. The rice paddies are not just fields. They are the result of generations of planning, labor, and cooperation. The forests are not just trees. They are sources of warmth, tools, medicine, and protection. The rivers are not just water. They are lifelines connecting mountains, villages, markets, and families. The village is not just a collection of houses. It is a living network of knowledge passed from one generation to the next. When you first arrived, you might have imagined that surviving here would depend on physical toughness. Perhaps you believed you would simply need to endure cold winters, carry heavy loads, and work long hours. Those things would certainly be difficult. But they would not be the greatest challenge. The greatest challenge would be learning. Learning the language of the seasons. Learning when the rain would come. Learning how much water each field needed. Learning which plants could heal and which could harm. Learning how to repair a roof before a storm arrived. Learning how to preserve enough food before winter closed the mountain roads. Learning the customs of a community where every action carried meaning. This knowledge could not be downloaded. It could not be memorized in a few weeks. It was built slowly. Through childhood. Through observation. Through mistakes. Through years spent beside people who already understood. A medieval farmer was not simply someone who worked in a field. A farmer was a scientist of the landscape. A weather observer. A water manager. A caretaker of soil. A keeper of traditions. You would arrive with modern knowledge, perhaps knowing things the villagers had never heard of. But knowledge from another world would not immediately replace what they knew. You would still need to understand this world. The seasons would not adjust themselves to your expectations. The river would not care about your plans. The soil would not respond to impatience. Nature cannot be rushed. It must be understood. You think about the first time you entered the rice paddies. The cold water around your legs. The mud pulling at your feet. The endless rows of seedlings waiting to be planted. At the time, it seemed like exhausting labor. Now, you see something different. You see a tradition refined over centuries. A system so carefully developed that entire communities could survive upon it. Every movement had purpose. Every season had meaning. Every task belonged to a larger cycle. The people of medieval Japan were not fighting against nature. They were living inside its rhythm. And perhaps that is the greatest difference between your world and theirs. Modern life often allows people to separate themselves from the natural world. Food appears without seeing the fields where it grows. Warmth appears without gathering the wood that creates it. Objects appear without knowing the hands that made them. Here, nothing is hidden. Everything is connected. Every meal carries a story. Every tool carries a history. Every home carries generations of repairs. Every tradition carries the memory of those who came before. This connection creates hardship. But it also creates meaning. You remember the winter evenings beside the hearth. At first, the darkness felt endless. But eventually, you learned to appreciate the quiet. The stories. The warmth. The simple comfort of being surrounded by people who shared the same struggles. You remember the festivals. The lanterns glowing beneath the night sky. The music drifting through the village. The laughter of children. The gratitude offered to the land that sustained everyone. You remember the difficult moments as well. The swollen river. The damaged fields. The illnesses that could not always be cured. The fear that came with uncertain harvests. This world was beautiful. But beauty did not remove difficulty. Peace did not mean comfort. Harmony did not mean ease. The people here endured because they accepted both sides of life. The hardship and the happiness. The loss and the renewal. The cold winter and the warm spring. The empty field and the abundant harvest. Everything moved in cycles. And people learned to move with them. You look across the village one final time. A young farmer walks toward the fields carrying the same type of tool that his ancestors used. A grandmother teaches a child how to prepare herbs. A carpenter repairs a wooden gate. A monk sweeps the temple path beneath ancient cedar trees. A fisherman checks his nets beside the river. No one here believes they are creating history. They are simply living. Yet centuries later, their lives remain important because they represent something universal. The desire to build. To protect. To teach. To continue. You would not survive a year in medieval Japan because you would be entering a world that required a lifetime of preparation. You would struggle because survival was not an individual achievement. It was a community effort. Because one person alone could not maintain the fields. One person alone could not rebuild after disaster. One person alone could not preserve centuries of knowledge. The village survived because everyone contributed something. Strength. Skill. Experience. Kindness. And that may be the final lesson this journey leaves behind. Human beings have always survived not because life was easy, but because they learned to support one another. Medieval Japan was not a world of constant battles and dramatic adventures. For most people, it was a world of quiet mornings. Of muddy fields. Of wooden homes. Of careful hands. Of changing seasons. Of ordinary lives that rarely appeared in history books. But without those ordinary lives, history itself would have stopped. The final evening arrives. The sky turns golden above the valley. The rice plants move gently beneath the wind. Smoke rises from the rooftops. The temple bell echoes one last time across the mountains. You stand beside the river and listen. The sound of flowing water has remained constant throughout your journey. It was here when you arrived. It will remain after you leave. The river does not remember individual footsteps. The mountains do not remember individual names. But the people who lived here left something behind. Not monuments. Not grand statues. Something quieter. A way of living. A reminder that survival comes from patience. That communities are stronger than individuals. That nature must be respected. That knowledge is a treasure passed from one generation to the next. And that history belongs not only to those who are remembered. It also belongs to those who simply endured. The farmers. The craftsmen. The fishermen. The families. The countless unnamed people who woke before sunrise and built the world around them one careful day at a time. You would not survive a year in medieval Japan. And that is okay. Because perhaps the purpose of this journey was never to prove that you could. Perhaps it was to understand the people who did. The people who lived with the rain. The forests. The mountains. The rivers. The seasons. The uncertainty. The beauty. And the endless quiet work of being human. The lanterns fade one by one. The village grows silent. The bamboo moves softly in the night wind. And somewhere beyond the mountains, another morning is waiting. Another season. Another generation. Another ordinary day that will quietly become part of history.